Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Good evening and welcome to the Thursday night edition of Spaced Out Radio Tonight. My name is Dave Scott. We're going to have a hell of a show talking UFOs and all sorts of black ops programs. Researcher, podcaster Olav Phillips is here tonight wearing all sorts of plaid. And you know his game is on when the plaid is on as well. They call him the California Clipper. I don't know why, but they do. It's awesome. Absolutely awesome. We're going to have a great night with Olav coming on up. But first, we have to say hello to each and every one of you, including Tim Mothman and his goatee, sharing the gold medal position. Kitty Caddywhack with a silver, Race Fan with a bronze medal tonight. Paramarv, how you doing, brother? Nice to see you. And who is next on our list? Well, it's Mel WD-40, lubing us up for tonight's show. I'm even wearing the Alien Lube shirt right here. Hold on, there it is. You can get that at spacedoutradio.com, the SOR Alien Lube shirt. Why? Because when you have Olav Phillips on, Mel knows all too and well you got to lube up the plaid. You have to. You have to in order to get Olav excited about this show. So we're excited to have Olav lubed up. Thank you, Mel, for doing so. Roswell Alien, Necessary Dialogue, nice to see you. Thunderhead, nice to have you here as we continue on with our roll call. Signs of Life, Lisa Smith, Robert Lamoth, nice to have you all here. Race Fan, again, how you doing? There's my lady, Mama Catherine. Mwah, I love you, Mama Catherine. I hope you had a wonderful day. I know you're going to have a wonderful night listening to this show. So what do you say we get to it? Are you good with that? I know you will be because I love you. I love you lots. Oh, you warm my heart. Thurston Howell III is here. Thurston Howell III will be signing autographs after the show. Line up to the left of the studio, if you don't mind, to the left of the studio. Kathy Evans, how are you? T-Bone, my man, nice to see you. Stephanie Kenny Blankenship, good to have you here. Dr. Bob, always a pleasure. As we roll on down, Mickey G, thank you for coming on in. As we continue on with our roll call here, we're going to continue scrolling on down. There's Operation Shutdown, Eternity Eternal. Nice to have you both here. And Doug Shelby is here. The Doug Shelby has arrived, which means we can officially start this show. Walter Kochubinski in the studio. How you both doing? Nice to have you both here. Forrest Louis has returned. Forrest Louis will be signing autographs after the show as well. Line up to the right of the studio, if you don't mind, to the right of the studio. Undead Jed. Algaray over on Twitch. 2,000 push-ups in 7 minutes to warm up for Olav tonight, and he did it all while wearing a plaid jumpsuit. Yes, he did, in honor of Olav tonight. That's right. All right, scrolling on down, Frankie B., how you doing? Nice to have you here. Pam Harris, looking lovely tonight as we continue on with our roll call. And who's next? Well, it's Tina Smith and Kurt M. Look at that. There they are. Contrary One, you're early tonight. How you doing? AJ, nice to see you. And who is next? Well, let's take a quick peek here. Matthew Goodcut, nice to have you here. Looks like you guys are excited for tonight's show. This is going to be awesome. I promise you. All right. As we scroll on down, Stargazer, nice to see you. Bad Cop and Sweet Donna C. How are you? Erica Stover, thank you for coming on in. What's the password? Exactly. Figure out the password in hour number 1, but make sure you use it wisely. I'm Hardcore on X and Millennium, my man. Nice to see you. Hold on. We're going to get the radio side going. Hello and welcome to the radio and podcast side of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Good to have you with us. My name is Dave Scott. Olav Phillips is here. We're going to get into black projects. We're going to get into UFOs and so much more. It's going to be a fun, fast night with Olav. We're in roll call on our YouTube side. We're 30 seconds away. Hello to Bobbert. Nice to have you here. As well, we say hello next to... Well, let's see. Maybe we're caught up. Nope, there's Badass Billy Gunn. How you doing? Nice to have you here. East Coast Turnaround. Thanks for coming on in. All right, Super Chat is open. It's a wonderful way to support what we do on this show, and you can shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Why? We do not have ugly swag, people. No ugly swag, so check it on out. Do me the favor, everyone. Throw those horns up. Let's rock.
Are you ready to hear your mystic voice of the night?
It's time to wake up.
He's here. Shush. Be quiet. He's ready for you to listen. Let's point our ears towards the little cabin in the woods, where together, my friends, we own the night. It's time for Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott.
From the mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on every major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot. Read the news wire. Check out our swag as well. You can follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. We're going to get deep into the dark secrets tonight. Researcher, podcaster, author, and a man who wears a lot of plaid, Olav Phillips, will be here momentarily to get into the dark stuff of ufology. It's going to be a lot of fun. You notice how he used the word stuff there? You know when I use the word stuff, I'm meaning some serious stuff here. Then in hour number 3, Swamp Dweller will join us to kick things off. We're going to follow that up with our good friend, the Wizard. Yes, the Wizard of UFOs. Josh Rutledge will be here for the UFO report. So let's get into the fun stuff right now. I'm looking forward to this. I hope you are too. Olav Phillips is a veteran UFO and paranormal researcher, author, and alternative history investigator known for digging into the edges of reality where government secrecy, high strangeness, and unexplained aerospace technologies collide. With decades of experience, Olav specializes in UFOs, secret space programs, deep state black projects, exotic propulsion, and hidden history of human contact with non-human intelligences. His work connects hard-to-find documents, leaked intel, and forgotten eyewitness testimony, offering a wider range of how much more is happening behind the scenes than most people ever realize. As the founder of the Anomalies Network and a contributor to major paranormal and conspiratorial platforms, Olav has written extensively on breakaway civilizations, lost technology, cryptoterrestrials, and the shadow groups that have influenced global events for generations. Yes, he is into the deep, he's into the dark, and he's right here for you tonight. Olav Phillips, it is always a pleasure to have you on Spaced Out Radio. How are you, my friend?
Greetings and salutations. Boy, that bio. Wow. That made me sound exciting.
You are an exciting guy. I mean, you wear different colors of plaid each day.
I do. Actually, all my shirts are plaid. I'm wearing green and black today.
Oh, good. That's a
It's just a little
good winter
cold.
color. It really is.
It's just a little cold out here, so I have to wear my jacket.
For listeners who have never heard your story before, you are somebody who has seen a number of UFOs. You've worked
Mhm.
in defense projects,
Mhm.
and you also are one of the biggest voices when it comes to the deep dark side of ufology, secret space programs,
Yeah.
and everything in between. How did this come of age for you?
It's actually funny. I always like to think that I'm the guy you've probably read my stuff or heard me on a podcast or a radio show, but you don't know who I am. So I always take great solace in that. It's a funny story, and I had to write it down. It's in the intro to the re-released book by Brad Steiger, it's like Mysteries of Time and Space or something, I think. And basically, what, by the way, brother Brad, I miss you, man. But basically, what happened is that I don't know, I was like 8 years old. I was reading a Choose Your Own Adventure in my nice snuggly bed, and I saw a light outside my window. I lived on the second floor, and this light was hovering, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Scared the crap out of me. So I hid. I mean, I did everything a kid's gonna do. I hid, I wished it away, but it didn't leave. So eventually, I worked up the courage to run out of the room across the hall to my parents' room. And I got my dad, and I told my dad, I said, "You were in the Air Force, yeah. You saw all kinds of planes and helicopters and whatever, yeah. Okay, you got to tell me what this thing is." And I'm scared out of my mind. So my dad, being a good dad, he says, "Get in behind me and get right behind me. I'm going to go through first, and I'll deal with whatever it is." So he bum rushes the door, and there's nothing there. So I go to my elementary school the next day, back when elementary schools had libraries and librarians. And I asked the librarian, I said, "Hey," because, when you're back then in the 80s, the librarian in a school, especially in elementary school, was less a librarian, more of like a gateway to information. And so I said, "Hey, I saw something. I can't figure out what it was. I know what an airplane is. I grew up on Air Force bases. My whole family was in the Air Force. My grandpa was in Strategic Air Command. My dad was in the Air Force. Even my wife was in the Air Force. My aunt married a guy who was in the Air Force, and everybody's in the Air Force. So I know airplanes." So she says, "Oh, okay, well, here's the Dewey Decimal Number, teachable moment." So I go over, I look up the Dewey Decimal Number. It's books about airplanes. And so I walked back to her. I said, "Look, that's not what I want. Any of the weird stuff. This is not an airplane." Right. And she's like, "Oh, you want one of those books?" So she gives me a different Dewey Decimal Number. I could still walk to that bookshelf and get the book. Like, I remember it that clearly. So I go get the book. I got the Hynek book. I got one of Veli's books. I think it was Messengers of Deception. And then I got Mysteries of Time and Space by Brad Steiger. And so I tried to read the Hynek book. It was too dense. Veli's book was too confusing because for an 8-year-old, it's about metaphor and symbolism, and I just couldn't rationalize it. And so I started reading the other book by Brad Steiger, and Brad Steiger's book opened up the world for me. There were time shifts, UFOs, cryptids. I mean, it was about every ultra terrestrial Fortean thing that you could imagine, and it just blew my mind, and that kind of started me on the path.
That is incredible. And the
That's
fact
a
that
short
you had
version.
that sighting, okay, as a youngster, and that it affected you that deeply,
Yeah.
it's been a passion for the last 40 plus years since then,
Mhm.
Olaf, that you have been searching and seeking answers only to find more roadblocks than actual answers to what we know. How did you get
Right.
down the rabbit hole of looking into all of the darker side of technology?
It's funny. When I started out for a very long time, I was a rampant believer that, every kind of weird light in the sky is aliens. And over time, I saw more and more. And it's you kind of get there after a while. I mean, if you're really reasonable about it and you're rational about it, you start to realize, okay, there are these other kinds of aircraft, like things with pulse detonation engines, aerospike engines, and you know, uh, you find it, and then the deeper you go, the more you start to hear about the truly weird stuff, the darker stuff. It's one thing like it's kind of like UFOs are the gateway drug, and then eventually you get to the cattle mutilations and you're like, oh, this is interesting. And then off the cattle mutilations, when you read enough of that crap, then you get to the human mutilations, right? Or if you look into UFOs enough, you start to realize that some of these are not alien. They must be something else. And then you start trying to figure out what it is. And if you're reasonable and rational about it, when you hit that fork where you can say, okay, well, I can't explain any of it. It must be aliens, or it could be human. Well, you start to look in the actual aerospace literature. You start to look in the Jane's Defense Weeklies of the, and you start to look at the actual documentation and try to understand it. I think a lot of people they skim the surface and they say, okay, well, I watched the Tic Tac video, and that's got to be alien. So, well, maybe not. I mean, it's about having an open mind. Truly, I have an open mind. I'm not here to tell you exactly what it is. I'm only here to tell you what I think it is. And I try to use Occam's razor, which is the simplest answer, is probably the right one.
What was your first find? What was your first deep dive into the secret space program or projects like that?
It was Alternative 3. That's what I actually started to write the book about, the
Okay,
original book. It was
explain
Alternative
to
3.
people what Alternative 3 is.
So it was a TV show that was aired on April 1st in England. Well, it was supposed to be aired on April 1st in England. It was basically a doomsday show that these investigative reporters were started out trying to figure out what the brain drain was in England in the 70s, and it was made in 77, and they realized that all these scientists were actually disappearing, and they were trying to explain why they were disappearing, and eventually they came to the realization that it was they were being shipped off world to Mars. And so the first time I watched it, I was at a I don't I think I was at like a sci-fi convention, or maybe like a Dungeons and Dragons convention when I was a kid, and I watched a 20,000 generation VHS copy because, you couldn't get a real copy of this thing. The masters were destroyed. The only known master reel, because it was shot on 16 millimeter, the only master reel that still exists is in the possession of the guy who actually filmed it, the guy who directed it. And, at the time I watched it, like, I didn't know who any of these people were. Like, the soundtrack was done by Brian Eno. If you know if you know electronica, Brian Eno is, like, one of the original pioneers of electronica. Well, he did the soundtrack for it. David Ambrose, the guy who wrote it, he went on to do some very popular stuff in Europe. Well, anyway, it was shown after, April 1st because of I think there was like a strike, and so they showed it later, and when they showed it, it scared the crap out of people so bad that in Britain, it's actually illegal to show it. In fact, in most of Europe, you can't actually air it. The only place in the world you can actually show it on television is in Japan. And the guy that ran NBC Drama at the time in 77 was in England, and he watched the airing, and he was like, "This is great, this is great." So he goes back and tries to option it to show it in America, and Standards and Practices, which is basically the censors told him that it was impossible to show it because it was too scary. It was too realistic. And so the first time I watched it, I thought it was crap. I thought it was utter crap. The production quality was mediocre. You know, it was just it was just unbelievable. And so the more times I watched it out of curiosity, the more it started to make sense. And then eventually I came to believe, after reading a quote from Leslie Watkins, who wrote the book version based on the show. He said that he had moved to New Zealand, and when he got his container of stuff from Australia, somebody had gone through it and taken all his actual research about it, because he had done all this research and he had come to believe that it was absolutely real. And so somebody had gone through and taken all his research out, and it just made me believe that it's real even more. And so what it is that if you watch Alternative 3, it's a TV show, period. The people in it are actors. In fact, one of the guys who plays, I forget his name right now in the show, but he's basically Buzz Aldrin. And that actor was actually in a whole bunch of science fiction TV shows in the 70s, including UFO, which was a pretty popular show back then. And you recognize all the actors, but the template of it is real. And I actually asked the guy who directed it. The last, I think, 4 minutes supposedly show a man landing on Mars by a Russian, like a Soviet module, and they see something moving around in the dirt. And I asked him how he actually did it, and he said that he filled these tables with red dirt, and they made this fake sky, and he drilled a hole through the bottom of one of the tables, and he kind of ran his finger around inside to make something move. And that sounded preposterous. So I talked to a couple. I have a friend who, he's real big in the horror world, and he's a horror host, and named Mr. Lobo. And I asked him if he knew anybody who did practical effects, and so he got me a guy who did practical effects, and I showed him the footage, and he's like, "That guy's lying. There's no way that's how they did it. It's totally BS." So what I came to realize, the more I looked into it, the more I realized that it's a structure, like it's a model. Everything in it is true, and I was able to verify that it's true, except, the landing on Mars thing. I can't prove that, but there's evidence of it. But everything else in the movie is true. All the different alternatives are all real. So that's how that was the first real discovery I made, was that Alternative 3 is real, and I was able to prove it.
How are you able to prove it? Like, is there paperwork? Is there a paper trail?
Yeah.
What leads you to it?
Well, so I went through each I started with before so there's a part where the main investigative, the host is walking with this guy, Professor Ballantyne, through a university that doesn't exist, and he's basically confronting him about Alternative 3. And the guy says, it all started at the American Chemical Society meeting in 1957, where they released a report that showed that, carbon dioxide was actually running out of control, and that we weren't processing it fast enough. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go see if that's real. And it actually was real. That there was I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but he was an oceanographer and a biologist, and he did a pioneering study of phytoplankton. And according to his research, the phytoplankton were only scrubbing the carbon dioxide. And remember, the ocean is one of the biggest carbon dioxide scrubbers, in the entire world, that and like the Amazon. And he said that the rate of carbon dioxide scrubbing by these phytoplankton was 50% of what they thought it was. And so, we should be choking on CO2 and other gases, and we basically are. If you look at the particulate that's in the air, and, there's a lot of argument around climate change, and that we're reaching this tipping point. Well, what he said in 1950, I think it was 57, is that there was no way that we could scrub this much the industrial age and the post-industrial age, there's no way we could scrub all that bad gas. And he was right. And so after that, they undertook a program to prepare for an ecological doomsday, and they actually did it. And the quote that came from the guy who did the research is that we are now undertaking an experiment in basically in climate change. I'm paraphrasing, but we're undertaking an experiment in climate change, the ramifications of which we could not even imagine. And so now in 2025, we're seeing the results of it, that the ice packs are the glaciers are melting, the ice packs are thinning, you know, there's off and on, there's fears that the conveyor belt that exists in the Atlantic Ocean will shut down, and you'll get a day after tomorrow kind of thing. I mean, there's plenty of evidence.
When we look at the dark programs, a lot of people have a trouble trying to understand the fact that there are secret projects going on, whether it's at Area 51, 29 Palms, or some secret hidden base on an island somewhere in the Pacific.
Right.
Olav, you have started to look into this. We got 3 minutes to go before we go to
Sure.
break. At what point do we start seeing or recognizing this type of technology? And how do we know it even exists?
Well, you already are. I mean, you can see footage of TR-3Bs with aerospike engines on Facebook. I mean, if you look, it's there today, right now. I mean, we already see it. We've been seeing it for 20 years. I mean, the SR-71 was developed in the 50s. It was started to become field deployed in the 60s and the 70s. The A-12 program was well into its advanced stages, and then became the SR-71. And I just bought a Lego kit for an SR-72 that was shown in Top Gun. It had skunkworks crap all over it, and the guys from the skunkworks were like, yeah, we designed it for the movie, but it's a complete airframe, and all the instrumentation, it's all there. And they showed it in freaking Top Gun. I mean, it's right in front of you.
You know what the best part about that scene in Top Gun was? Is how they actually had the Lockheed Skunk Works skunk on
Yes.
it.
Yeah,
You
on
know?
the throttle, they had the
Yeah, I
Lockheed.
know.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people wouldn't catch that. I remember when I
No.
saw Top Gun Maverick for the first time, and I was so giddy when I actually saw the Skunk Works logo on there. I was like, man, I know what that is. I know what this is.
Yeah,
It was
but that's revelation of the method, man. They show you what they're doing. They don't hide it. Nobody looks. That's the key. It's like alternative 3. I went through alternative 1, 2, 3. I went through all of them, and I found evidence that they actually happened. It wasn't hard.
Well, I mean, but that's kind of the secret of it all, isn't it? That so much of this is hidden in plain sight, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. I have a relative that knows about such things, and I asked them once. I said, how do you hide this stuff? And the response was under the flagpole, which means out in public. You don't try to hide it, because honestly, as my philosophy professor put it, 90% of we were talking about the allegory of the cave, and this idea that the people are lost. The door's right there, but they can't see it, right? And so would always say, most people are content with a six-pack in the 49ers, because I from the Bay Area. And so, he'd say that everybody's content with a six-pack and watching a 49ers game. They don't walk outside and actually look up in the sky.
And we're just blinded to it because we're not used to it.
No, you're blinded to it because you don't look. It's not because you're not used to it. Trust me, I watched an aurora fly across the Nevada sky with a donut on a rope in broad daylight. Most people just don't look up. They look down. They look down at the ground. They look at the tree in front of them. They don't look up in the sky. If you look up in the sky, there's all kinds of weird stuff up there.
Hold that thought. Olav Phillips here, author, researcher, podcaster, and a guy who always looks great wearing plaid. We're going to bring him back What is the secret space program when we return? And what kind of toys are they hiding? All right, buddy, we're clear.
Okie dokie.
Apparently, Frankie B thinks we're an archive.
Okay.
Or I mean, is this a crive? We're a crive showing.
A crive showing.
Yeah. We're a crive. Yes, we are a crive.
You know, to your listeners on the chat, I wasn't born in Mendenhall. I was born in Wiesbaden. I was born in a country that doesn't exist. It
Olav,
ceased
I
to
got to
exist.
ask you something. Who's your favorite golden girl?
Probably B. Arthur.
Yeah, B. Arthur. We call him B. Arthur around here. Paranormal Portals, Brett Thomas, the golden bee of
B.
the
Arthur.
paranormal. Right
She's
there,
a-
B. Arthur.
She's just such a bitch. I just love her to death. I liked her in Mod. Shows how old I am. I liked her in Mod.
You know what? There weren't a lot of women on television outside of like pro wrestling that you could
Yeah.
look at and say, yeah, she could kick my ass. B.
She was a
Arthur had
Marine.
that look.
She was a Marine.
Yeah.
No, she
Yeah.
could. I think that's probably why I liked her, because she was strong and she didn't take any shit.
Right?
Yeah, but also, you know, she had a heart.
Big heart.
Big heart, yeah. But no, she was in the U.S. Marines.
Yeah. Oh, I know. That she still looked like she could kick ass.
I think she probably could. But then again, oh, what's her name? The chef, Julia Child. She was like in special operations. I mean, Dr. Ruth was a sniper. Yeah. Dr. Ruth, the sex therapist, she was a sniper.
Could you
Anyway.
imagine?
Getting killed by Dr. Ruth? No.
Yeah. Not a good way to go.
Getting killed in general is a kind of a bad scene. I wouldn't recommend
agree. I would
Yeah.
agree.
it. I know a guy who's a sniper, man. They're intense. They're intense people.
Oh, yeah. I worked with a guy whose son was a sniper in the Canadian Armed Forces.
Yeah.
And he said being the dad of a sniper was horrible because all you would do, it didn't matter what time of the day or night, you would get a phone call. Dad, I'm just letting you know, I'll call you when I get back. Can't tell you where I'm going. Can't tell you how long I'll be gone. Can't tell you anything, but call you when I get back.
Yeah, I have some experience with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Freaky.
Yeah. Actually, you know, I had a relative who fought the Revolutionary War, and he was the equivalent of a scout sniper in the Massachusetts militia. And so he fights through the whole Revolutionary War. Then I guess he fell in love with some girl and he moved to Quebec. And then I guess he didn't like Quebec, so he moved back to Massachusetts with her.
Not surprising.
I reserve judgment. I hear it's beautiful though.
Okay, we got
But, you
about
know,
2 minutes, buddy.
But you know, I live near Yosemite, so it's beautiful anyway.
Yeah. I love living in the mountains, man.
Oh yeah. It's just cold as fuck. But I like it.
Me too.
My wife was like, "What, you're gonna sit outside and do this? Are you insane? It's so cold." I said, "Well, I'll do it outside as long as I can. Then I'll come inside."
All right, we got about a minute and a half.
All right. Then you can ask me the really hard questions, huh?
Yeah, that's when it gets nasty.
That second 30 minutes. And then on, it's a dumpster fire of interrogation.
Of interrogating debauchery of the secret space program.
You know what? There's a book you should read. It's called the Kubark Manual. Go Google the Kubark Manual. You should read that.
God, if I read everything you told me, I wouldn't be doing this show. I'd still be reading.
Can Erica Stover hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have a relative as well.
What did Erica Stover say? My dad was in OSI. Oh, look at that.
I have a relative who is in that organization as well.
Hold on right there, guys. Thank you to T-Bone and Erica for the super chats. Thank you, Amy, for becoming a YouTube member. And thank you to everybody who's been shopping at our Spaced Out Radio store recently. We really appreciate it because really we don't have any ugly swag. There's none at all. You can wear our stuff out in public and actually be proud of it. Here we go. Here we go with the second half hour of Spaced Out Radio. My name is Dave Scott. We're going to get into the secret space program with our guest, Olav Phillips, here momentarily. But first, I want to remind all of you that if you have wondered where our archives are, we got them. They're free. YouTube or any major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. Here we go. Olav Phillips, podcaster, researcher, a guy who wears a lot of plaid and proud of it. He's here to talk about the secret space program. And Olav, we're glad that you're here.
Well, I am very glad to be here. I always love doing Spaced Out Radio. Not only does it have the best get or best host ever, but also the listeners are actually phenomenal.
Your check is in the mail for that.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true.
It is true.
Hey, you know what?
Great
I haven't
listeners.
done this yet, but I know you this is personal for you a little bit.
Okay.
But a lot of people don't know, may not know, and a lot of people do know the name of Clyde Lewis from the host of the Ground Zero radio show and podcast. It's a great show. He's been doing it for 20 plus years. He's an authoritative voice in the United States about a lot of conspiracies, a lot of UFO and paranormal topics that he's delved into over the years.
Mm-hmm.
He is fighting a real battle right now, and we want to make sure that everybody in Spaced Out Radio land gives him a big healing hug from wherever you are.
Absolutely. Yeah, Clyde's having some health issues, and they actually have a GoFundMe as well. So definitely, contribute if you got a couple bucks for the crew that helps Clyde and Clyde. But yeah, he just send him a big healing hug. He could really use it right now. And he's a good guy, has a great show. Yeah.
Yes,
definitely send him a big
we want to
hug.
give him a shout out because everybody,
Absolutely.
we're a small community. We're an emotional community. We're a loud community, but we're still a very small community, and we have to support our own. So everybody out there, send him some healing and some hugs, man, because he's going through a tough time, and these topics are his life. I've never met Clyde personally, never talked to him, but from what I hear, he's a very nice guy. And even though we're not personal friends or anything, we still have to send that support and that love.
Absolutely. Send lots.
Absolutely.
He is a super nice guy.
Let's get to the secret space program.
Okay.
All right. Because I can talk about this topic literally every single night. I love the secret space program. When did we start calling it a secret space program? How did this come together?
I don't know when we actually started calling it a secret space program. I mean, it started in the 50s, but I don't know when we actually used that term. Probably after 2000, I think, people started to really realize that something was going on up there. But I couldn't tell you when we actually started using that term. I mean, it's a pretty basic term. I mean, it's a term that you'd imagine could be used, but yeah, I think people really started to find out about it in the 2000s. After X-Files. I think it was after X-Files. Funny story. I heard through we'll just call it the grapevine. When I wrote the book about the secret space program, I have some evidence that Chris Carter read it. And there's a monologue when the X-Files came back and they did that miniseries. There's a monologue in the garage where Mulder is laying it down for Scully, and he's like just, telling her how it really is. And a lot of the content for that actually came out of my book. I was getting a kick out of that.
See, for me, I'll tell you where I often wondered because I was a very amateur, I still am a very amateur military aircraft buff.
Yeah,
And
we all
I
are.
was absolutely heartbroken in 1992 when they retired the SR-71 Blackbird.
Right.
I'd seen it fly a couple of times.
Sure.
And then they said, well, the satellite technology is so good now. We don't need these airplanes to be flying.
Right.
We've got spy satellites all over the world. And, it's just antiquated technology. And we bought it. We bought it.
Well, you bought it. I didn't buy it.
No, but when I say we, I'm saying the majority of the
Oh,
public.
yeah. Sure. No,
Right?
that's true.
But I remember thinking, I was like, no, they got something else. Look what they just did with that stealth fighter, the Nighthawk, the F-117 Nighthawk.
Yeah, they're retiring that too. That tells you something.
Yeah. Believe it or not, people, the F-117 Nighthawk has been retired since 2008, yet it still flies in Tonopah. But it's retired, Olav.
It's retired. The way, at least from what I've seen, and I go by publicly available information. I'm not, I don't I don't do whistleblowers or anything like that. But the way that it works is that, they retire something when they have a replacement. They don't retire it until there is a replacement. I mean, look at the B-52. The B-52 was invented in the 50s. I mean, I don't know, we're on like the Q rev of the thing. They've overhauled the engines like 20 times. I mean, they still fly them. When you get onto a 737 and you fly to Hawaii, that plane's been in the air for 30 years. They don't retire those kinds of things until they have replacements. It's that simple.
What do you think replaced it?
I think the SR-72. I think that there's a couple of aircraft, and it's asinine that they would retire the SR-71, but they're still flying U-2 missions. I mean, you know, that that predated the SR-71. But no, I think it's probably the SR-72. I think it's probably there's a couple, the TR-3, they probably use that. I mean, there's a spot here up above Strawberry, California, where you're basically, I think, 2 or 300 miles in a straight line to Area 51, and there's a mountain range between that point and Area 51, the Sierras. But when they climb out, I think it's 200 miles. When they climb out of Area 51, you can actually watch it. You can see the dot, and you can see the afterburners, like the glow as it climbs out. And these aircraft, I mean, it's to use one of your favorite sports, it's like a hockey stick, that kind of curvature. But I think there are a couple different aircraft that they're using to replace it. And if you go to ECETI out in Trout Lake, Washington, you can see them all night. Rectangular wedge-shaped aircraft flying through the sky. I mean, it's not difficult. It's right there in front of you.
Where do you think they're hiding these things now? Because I personally think Area 51 has become more of a test range rather than anything spectacular for UFOs or dark
Yeah.
projects like where they hid the F-117 for for years at Area 51.
Well, the A-12 SR-71 was there. The Nighthawk was there. The F-117, B-2 bomber. They test all that stuff out there, and they still do. You know, as far as why they hide it, this is where I fall out of favor with my fellow conspiracy nuts. I do honestly believe that a lot of things should be kept secret. I mean, these are national defense things, right? We don't necessarily, we shouldn't necessarily know the specifications of the SR-71 or the SR-72 or the whatever they're flying out there. But no, I think they kept it hidden because in an adversarial world, which you look at Russia, you look at China, in an adversarial world, you don't want them to know exactly what you got. You always want to hold something back in case you need it. I mean, the only reason we know about the F-117s and the B-2 bombers is the successive wars in the Middle East. They decided to annihilate Saddam Hussein, so they sent over a squadron of F-117s and a whole bunch of A-10 Warthogs and tore up that place and basically annihilated him in 48 hours? So, but you don't have that element of surprise if you know exactly what it is. But it's fun to guess. It's fun to explore.
I remember
But
talking to an F-117 pilot a few months after the war, and in my hometown, they had a big air show in Abbotsford, British Columbia. They still hold it
yeah,
every year. And they brought in an F-117 pilot. And this is a true story. Many people don't know this, but our slogan is "We Own the Night."
right.
And how I came up with that was I remember looking at his shoulder patch,
Yep.
and it was an F-117 with a skunk on it,
Yeah.
and it said on the bottom, "We Own the Night." And I thought that was the baddest patch I have ever seen,
It's
right?
I think it's actually a squirrel. It's the secret squirrel.
Or
There,
something like that. I
yeah,
thought it was a skunk. I'm gonna
no,
see if I can find it here.
find it. I think it's a squirrel. It's the secret squirrel. But yeah, there's actually a book written by Trevor Paglen called, I think, If I Told You I'd Have to Destroy You. And it's actually an analysis of, it's just a book filled with patches, and he analyzes these super secret patches
Mhm.
and what they mean, because in each patch there's a whole bunch of stuff, and if you understand what it represents symbolically, you can actually tell what it is.
Well,
It's like a secret language.
yeah, we'll get into patches here momentarily, but
Sure.
I am gonna bring it up here. So, for our radio audience who can't see, the F-117 pilots wore these patches where their aircraft was right on the front. There was a Lockheed
Oh,
Skunk
it is
word
a
skunk
it is a
there,
skunk. Okay, I was
dressed
thinking
up
a different one.
like death
Yep.
in a Red Riding Hood type hoodie. There is a mosque and the oil fields of the desert in
Yep.
Iraq. It says Operation Desert Storm, and then on top of it, it has "We Own the Night." Now, it's what you don't see or what you don't calculate, which is very interesting. So, for instance, on this military patch, there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 or 12 stars and a
Yep.
crescent moon, because the crescent moon is a symbol of the Middle East. And
Right.
you have the Persian Gulf in the background. So and you have this sand road that is the road to Baghdad. So the F-117s were a very, very powerful force in Baghdad during that time.
Yeah.
And one of the things all of this pilot told me, and I said, "What was it like flying into Baghdad at night?" To be honest, it was probably one of the most beautiful fireworks show I ever seen. And as I went vertical, I was looking up over Baghdad, watching all the tracers come through. He goes, "Then I realized, oh crap, they're firing at me."
Yeah. Well, I talked to an SR-71 pilot once. I used to produce Clyde Show, and we had a couple of guys come on to talk about the SR-71 and Area 51, the more conventional view of it. And he told me that he said, when you fly in the SR-71, you fly so high that they enter a thing they call the twilight zone, where it's like twilight the entire time you're flying. And you can see the curvature of the earth, and you can see the stars, and he said it's really beautiful. But he said it's so beautiful you actually get addicted to it. And when you stop flying up there as a pilot, because the thing's so fast that you can't really make like huge course corrections. You're not like weaving in that thing. You basically fly in straight lines like in an arc. And he said you just hang up there, and it's just insanely beautiful. And he said that when you eventually retire, or you get old enough that you stop flying, he said you really miss it. You crave it. You crave going back up there.
Do you believe that we're up to like an SR-75, SR-76 now?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say because there's no real way. The only way you can tell where you're at is observationally. Like, you have to see it. And I I would suspect that we're deep into the SR-72 time, and I think they're probably working on the next generation to replace it, because basically what happens, right, is that they'll develop an aircraft and it'll have XYZ capability, right? And the minute it goes mainstream, and they actually start flying it, because the minute they fly it, everybody sees it. You can't hide it. That's when they start working on the next generation one. Is about the time you start to see the one that's in current operation flying. By the time you see that, they're already on to the next one. And Skunkworks is the absolute premier development operation to build those aircraft.
Researcher Michael Schratt, aviation historian as well, also believes that, if you go back to 1992, the former head of Lockheed Skunk Works, Ben Rich, stated that he believed that they were about 50 years ahead of what
Mhm.
society sees in flight. But Michael Schratt has come out recently stating that he believes that number is closer to 80 to 100 years ahead. What's your thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Well, I actually talked to a guy once who did DARPA stuff, and when you talk to people like that, you have to be very careful, right? Because you don't want to know what they know, and they don't want to know what they know. And so I
Hold on,
always
I'm going
ask.
to stop you right there. What do you mean by that? That's a very important saying.
Well, information is dangerous, right? And it's dangerous because, if you talk to somebody who worked for DARPA, if they tell you something that's classified, not only do they go to prison, but you can go to prison too.
Right.
And so to possess classified knowledge it's a burden. You think to yourself, well, I got a security clearance, right? So I can see all this stuff. Actually, you don't see a whole lot of stuff, because you only find out about the stuff that's critical to what you're doing. But it's a burden to have it. It's a burden, to carry that with you, because you can't tell anybody what you did or what you saw. And you want to, you're like, hey, I saw this cool thing. Let me tell you. Well, you can't. And people who work in that world will not tell you. There are not a lot of people that'll break that oath of secrecy, right? In fact, Luis Elizondo, before he released his book on UAPs,
Yeah.
he was required to give it to the DoD to have it scrubbed. So you're
Yeah.
seeing a sanitized version of his work.
No,
You
they
know?
are very careful, but that's also what the
Yeah.
military industrial complex is all about. You could have somebody at 29 Palms making some sort of computer screen for some sort of jet fighter. They
Right.
don't know what they're making it for. They just know that they have their orders to make it. And then the tires are made in, say, Michigan, and another
I'll
part
t
is made in Kentucky, and then the body is made in St. Louis or
I'll tell you
whatever
a
it may
story.
be.
So my mom my mom was a nurse, and my mom worked with another nurse, and her husband was a machinist, a very good machinist, very sophisticated advanced machining kind of stuff. And he worked in this little machine shop, and they made bolts. They made bolts out of some very exotic material. And that's literally all they did is they hand machine bolts all day, all night. Bolts, bolts, bolts. And they had some kind of DoD contract. They didn't know where they went. They just made bolts. And they could, for some reason, some material science reason, they couldn't like cast them. Like they actually had to machine them. They were like titanium or some other exotic material. And so one day they were going through a museum, and it was it was like a museum of nautical stuff, and they had a reproduction of a nuclear reactor from a fast attack submarine. And the guy's looking at this. It was basically a training reactor that they had used, and they decommed it, so they put it in a museum. And he's looking at this, and he goes, "Oh my God, that's my bolt." I guess they had to put a special mark on it or something. He's like, "Oh my God, that's my bolt. Those are the bolts that I made. They were used in a nuclear reactor." Well, he didn't know. He spent his entire career machining bolts. He never knew what they were used for. That's how you keep things secret. You farm out, those guys make bolts, those guys make housings that the bolts fit in, those guys make nuts that attach to the other end of the bolts. I mean, everything's separated to keep you from figuring out what it's for.
No, very true. And
Yeah.
that's how the military industrial complex has spider webbed its way into different states and into different cities. And this is why they have so much pull, because they may have 4,000 workers in one state and 30,000 in another. And if their
Right.
representative is voting against something defensive, they're going to be like, we could move these 30,000 jobs over from Washington State to Pennsylvania or whatever it may be.
But to answer your question, I talked to this guy, that I knew, and he had worked in some DARPA programs, and he said I didn't ask him what he worked on. That's a super big no-no. You don't do that. But I asked him. I said, if you look at what you worked on, how far advanced is it outside of the commercial world? And he said that he felt comfortable answering that because I don't know what exactly he's talking about. And he said, it ranges depending on what you're working on, but usually it's a minimum of 50 years ahead. And in some cases, it's more like 100. So it's a range depending on what what you're working on. I mean, there's a belief that they've had fairly sophisticated AI systems since the 90s. Uh, liquid nitrogen cooled quantum computing kind of stuff.
That's just incredible. But where are they playing with this?
They're all in different places. It's hard to say. I mean, you don't really know. I mean, it's funny when I went to UC Davis, and there was this rampant rumor that the engineering department had a nuclear reactor. And it was this rumor through the whole school. Did I was in liberal arts, I was in arts and sciences, but even in arts and sciences, we were doing anthropology, but we heard the rumors that there was an engineering lab that had a small scale nuclear reactor. I mean, that's at UC Davis in the middle of nowhere. You can't tell. You really can't. It could be anywhere. That's the truth. I mean, a lot of it is in places that you'd expect where there's no people. Stuff they need to test that flies or drives or whatever, they're going to do that where there's no people, right? But you still have a satellite problem. The satellite overflights of places like Dugway or Area 51. The Russians and the Chinese prioritize tasking of satellites to watch those places. And so they have at Area 51,
Right.
Apparently they have a big clock, and when the clock, every 50 minutes they have to like either wheel everything back into the hangar or cover it with special tarps with
Yes.
geometric patterns to confuse the cameras.
And they also have
And that's public
cutouts.
knowledge.
They
Yeah,
also
they have
have
cutouts.
cutouts of
Absolutely.
weird shaped aircraft. So when the Russian or Chinese satellites are flying over, all they can see is these weird, strange shadows. I mean, they're lying flat on the
Well,
ground, but up.
they paint them. They paint them
Yeah.
on the ground. They
Yeah.
actually paint them on the ground.
Olav, I'm going to get you to hold on right there because
Sure.
we are going to go to break. When we return with Olav Phillips tonight, what's the difference between a UFO and a UAP? We're going to find out. And do we have bases on the moon? Next on Spaced Out Radio. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott. All right, buddy, we're clear. I'm going to put you in the green room and I'll be back in a minute, okay?
Sure.
All right. Be right back, everybody. Be right back. Be right back. One of these days, I'm going to get some commercials put in here. I am back. Let us bring Olav back. There he is.
Oh, sorry, I was reading. Somebody asked a question. I was going to answer it. I
I
didn't
have
find it.
the questions all highlighted for you, brother.
Okay. You're going to ask me?
I will ask you.
All right.
Yep. I'm all ready for it.
Well,
Where?
hopefully everybody's enjoying it. I don't know. I feel sometimes when it gets to conspiracy stuff, I feel like a wet blanket because I'm like, well, secrets should be kept.
Oh, no.
I don't know where the hell they put this stuff. I know
Mm.
some of the places.
By the way, guys, if you get an opportunity while you're listening to this show, if you have the opportunity, go look at the moon tonight. The moon looks spectacular.
Oh,
in
really?
full
I
moon.
can go
It's a
look.
huge moon. I believe it's a super moon tonight.
Oh, it's a supermoon.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Thank you to Erica and T-Bone for the great super chats. Thank you to
Oh,
Amy
yeah.
for the membership. Greatly appreciate it. And we are going to get to Olav here momentarily. Want to remind everybody that a good Christmas present is a VIP ticket to Caribou Con 2026, September 18th through 20th in 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia, where I live just outside the studio here. So make sure you go to cariboucon.com, cariboucon.com.
What is Caribou Con?
Here we go with hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. We greatly appreciate you tuning us on in wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Olav Phillips is our guest. We're going to get to whether or not there are UFOs and bases on the moon. We're going to get to a little bit more, get deep into the conspiratorial stuff. I love this stuff. I really do. But first, we want to say hello to all of you listening in on our terrestrial affiliates across North America, digitally on every major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, we have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. Olav Phillips is here. He's an author, researcher, experiencer of the unknown, and we love it when he is here because we get to get into the weird, deep, dark side of ufology, and I love this topic. I really do. Olav, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh, same here. I absolutely love this show and the guests. And by the way, Paramarv found all my links. he, he really looked me up. So good job.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We got to convince Olav to come to our Vegas party this year.
Yeah, I'm really going to try to come this year.
You should. You deserve it. Come hang out. I'll even bring some plaid for you. How about that?
Okay. I get some Canadian plaid.
Real Canadian plaid.
Real Canadian plaid. Okay.
That's right. That's right. Olav, I have learned over the years to redefine what UFO and UAP are.
Mhm.
Okay. I've learned that UFO is something that is unexplained. That includes USOs, that includes
Oh, yeah.
NHI, aliens, everything like that. Spacecraft, alien spacecraft. UAP, more so a cover term, mainly
Mhm.
for human technology.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I mean, and I think when they did those congressional hearings, the first ones, I think we really got that out of it, right? Because the DNI, Director of National Intelligence at that time, he said when they were talking about the Tic Tacs and all this other stuff that were declassified, right? He said, they're emitting radio transmissions. They're emitting first he said they're emitting signals, and we have captured the signals and we know what they are. Well, if I'm an alien coming from Zeta Reticuli, I'm probably not going to use radio traffic. I'm probably going to use some other kind of discrete communication system that we haven't invented yet. And honestly, even with the greatest supercomputers in the world, it would take a long time for any government, a consortium to figure out what it said, right? So, I think that really was the litmus test where we found out, okay, these UAPs that we keep seeing, there's something to it. And a long time ago, I got a transmission from a MiG-29. It tells you how long ago it was. A MiG-29 pilot out on the western frontier of Russia, and this was after the Soviet Union had fallen, and I actually had a guy who's kind enough to translate it for me. And basically, one thing I found it fascinating is, the Soviet Union was long gone at that point, but he was still saying like comrade major, comrade colonel, which I thought was hilarious. But basically, he chased this thing and they kept telling him to chase it. And he got up to a point where he was at full power, like full afterburner trying to chase this thing, and it was still getting away from him. And they couldn't figure out what it was. He couldn't get a good radar lock on it. He could see it, but it would come and go. And after he chased it for a while, it turned and headed toward NATO, like the NATO frontier. And you have to ask yourself, if that's an alien, why are they heading toward Western Europe and trying to get out of Russian airspace, right? That an alien wouldn't care. They wouldn't even necessarily have a concept of the Russian Federation versus NATO. But whatever this object was, extremely high speed, totally ripping past the MiG-29 at full power. I mean, he said the aircraft was shaking, that he was pumping out so much power out of those engines, and he couldn't catch it. It just zoomed off toward Western Europe. So yeah, I think UAPs are definitely human built. Maybe they're by us or China or Russia, Japan, Germany. I don't know who made them, but they're definitely made by us, for sure. That's my belief.
So, how do we define what's alien and what's not anymore? Can we?
A long time ago, I'd say yes, you could clearly define it because you have vehicles that are doing things that are insane, right? Like when I was at Davis, there was a mass UFO sighting in Dixon in the mid 90s, and we went out there and walked the next night thinking we wouldn't see anything, and I watched 14 UFOs dogfight, and they were making geometric patterns. I mean, they were flying they weren't, well, they were flying triangles, but when they came down, which is a whole nother story, to low altitude, and I watched those for a while, but they were making squares, like the lights in the sky. There's 14 lights in the sky, and they're making circles, squares, rectangles, triangles. The speed at which they were making these turns would have killed a pilot, right? There's too many G's, and there's no airframe that exists on the face of the earth that I'm aware of that could actually make a 90-degree turn at high speed. But nowadays, our technology has pushed the envelope so far that I wouldn't necessarily say that we couldn't do it. I mean, a human couldn't do it, but you could have a drone that could do it. So it's probably a lot harder to figure out now. But I look for the really weird ones, and even Hynek and Valley, they say, well, Hynek especially, he said that 10%, roughly 10% of all the UFO sightings that he saw at Blue Book were unexplainable. And he said that those 10% were probably alien.
Do you think then that we have potentially something interstellar that is continually watching us? That maybe there are these hidden motherships out there where these craft maybe dock and they are having the time of their life flying into our atmosphere?
Um, yeah, I think it's possible. I mean, the sighting in Dixon, for example, the night before we went, they had a huge cigar-shaped UFO that basically went along the railroad tracks, and that's something that you see, that they tend to fly along railroad tracks or roadways, like things that they can use for mapping, right? And they had the entire police department out there chasing this thing, and when they got the entire police department, they called up to the sheriff's department. They called people in off leave to chase this thing. I mean, you had all these cops chasing this thing. and it's like, if it was human, why would they do that? I think actually, I think to see the difference between something that's human built and something that might be ultra terrestrial, extraterrestrial in origin, I think you have to look at what it's doing. Like back in the 90s, there were all these triangular shaped UFOs that were flying around England and Europe, and they would shine lights on roadways, and they'd hang out by nuclear reactors, or they'd hang out by cemeteries. And it's like you have to ask yourself, if I'm a human pilot, flying one of these wedge shaped or they weren't wedge, they were triangles. And I actually saw one. But if I'm flying one of these kind of triangles and I'm a human pilot, why am I hovering over a cemetery, shining weird beams into it? That makes no sense. If it's military or governmental, they don't just do things, they do things for a reason. I mean, I may not know what the reason is, but there's a purpose to it. And some of the UFOs are seen in ways that are not purposeful. And a government would not waste time or money or pilots doing things that are not purposeful.
With that technology, then on the human side, do you
Mhm.
think we have craft? Maybe it's the TR-3Bs or others that
Right.
can stay airborne for infinite amount of time.
I don't think that they can stay aloft for an infinite amount of time, but they can stay up there for quite a while. I mean, even a commercial airliner, right, can fly from Los Angeles to Sydney in Australia. It's like, what is it? Something like 20 hours. So, with more high performance engines, especially things like aerospikes that, it's yeah, I mean, we already have plenty of aircraft that can stand in the sky for a really long time, and they've experimented with drones that are solar powered, right? That's gonna be more like a prop versus a jet engine or a turbofan. Those require fuel, but no, I mean, yeah, we have global hawks can stay up there for quite a long time in orbit and take photos and monitor. So, yeah, I mean, absolutely. We have vehicles that can stay up there for quite a long time, for sure.
What do you think? What kind of propulsion system do you think they have? Would it be nuclear? Would it be some sort of fission? What do you think it might be?
Aliens?
No, us.
Oh, us? We have a whole bunch of different kinds. Actually, Stanton Friedman, the UFO researcher, back in the 50s, I think it was the 50s, he worked on a nuclear powered aircraft, but it was so heavy because of all the shielding that they barely could get the thing off the ground. I mean, I think that for us, the conventional-ish stuff that flies in the atmosphere probably uses, jet fuel, maybe modified jet fuel, right? Once you get into the secret space program and you're talking about stuff that's outside, who knows? I mean, probably fusion, like cold fusion, or probably not fission, like nuclear, but probably cold fusion. But I mean, we have aircraft carriers. We have a real big one sitting off in Venezuela right now. It uses a nuclear reactor.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, if you look at aircraft carriers,
Mhm.
they're nuclear powered. Some of them
Yeah.
don't have to refuel for 20, 30 years.
It's not quite that long, but yeah, they don't have to refuel for many, many years, for sure. But yeah, I mean, it really my suspicion is, based on everything that I've seen, is that the stuff that flies inside the atmosphere uses some kind of either derivative of straight, you know, was a JP7 like jet fuel. Because one of the problems you have, especially in a military context, is that the more exotic it is, the harder it is to maintain. So these M1 Abrams, right? They have turbine engines in them. They actually run on jet fuel. Okay, so, we give a bunch of them to the Ukraine, for example, and they're looking at this thing. It's like, okay, I'm running two jet engines in the back of this tank. I need a jet mechanic to be able to fix it, and I've got to truck this jet fuel all over the place. Meanwhile, you've got Leopards and others that are running on diesel, right? It's harder to maintain it. They break down more. So I think my suspicion is at least the stuff that flies inside the atmosphere, I would say, is definitely probably jet fuel or based on jet fuel. I don't think they need any kind of exotic propulsion. Well, I mean, they are exotic propulsion systems, but not exotic fuels. The stuff where I would expect to see something that runs on, say, helium-3 would be something that operates outside the atmosphere.
And you believe right now we have craft, human craft, that we can get and fly to the moon.
I do. I definitely do, yeah.
What craft would those be? Describe it for people who may not know.
Well, I mean, some of the things that are wedge-shaped, I think are definitely candidates for it, because they're designed to fly so high. That you get up to a certain point and engage some kind of a rocket motor, and you can push yourself beyond the envelope up into low Earth orbit. Because you're not going straight up, you're doing it kind of a little bit at a time, raising your altitude until you just kind of escape it. But I mean, we had a space shuttle. The space shuttle could do it. If the space shuttle could do it, we can definitely. I mean, it used a rocket to get up there, but if you have something that's designed to do that, then yeah, I think we definitely have stuff that at a minimum can get suborbital, but it could get orbital for sure. I think we have space planes.
And you are convinced too that we have bases on the moon.
I do.
What is your
Base
evidence of that?
back in the again, alternative three, back in the late 50s, the Air Force had a study called Lunex, and the Army had, I think it was the Army, but I think Army was Horizon. And the Army in particular, the Air Force took an Air Force approach, which was they wanted to have a rocket that landed, and then they turned it into a base, and very sophisticated. The Army was a lot more simplistic about it. That they wanted to put in Quonset huts, which in the 50s makes sense, but they're like pressurized Quonset huts buried in regolith, which is that material that you see that's on the surface of the moon. So if they were trying to come up with something in the 50s, by 2025, I'm sure they figured it out. There's also some weird things that happen, like transient light phenomenon that happens on the moon, where astronomers all over the world for decades have reported seeing lights moving across the surface. And John Lear actually found a bunch of photos which appear to show tracks from like a wheeled vehicle moving across the surface of the moon. So I think we definitely have some level of operation up there. Some people think that we have a very sophisticated helium-3 mining operation. Us and the Russians. The Russians had a program from the early 60s, I think it was, called Zvezda, where they were going to put a base on the moon. I talked to a guy once where he had an uncle who worked for some kind of aluminum or steel manufacturer, and they had a contract to the government, and they were shipping just horrendous amounts of metal to the government, and they couldn't. The guy, it was all being billed out all weird, and he went to his boss and asked questions. And the guy said, "Don't ask questions." And then later they found a reason to fire him. Right? You hear stories. But yeah, no, I think we definitely do. I think we definitely have something on Mars too. It's in the book. If you buy The Secret Space Age, I have a picture in there of it. And it's smooth. It looks like a house from Malibu, built in the side of a cliff. Most of the time and it has a sphere on the top of it. Most of the time when I show it to people, they think it's in Malibu, but it was actually in a canyon on Mars.
Oh,
And
wow.
we're not talking the face on Mars or anything like that. I mean, this is a perfectly smooth, kind of trapezoidal shape with a black dome on the top that's actually reflecting sunlight. And in the book, I'm a strong believer that if I'm going to make a crazy claim like that I should have some proof. And so in the book, I give you the URL that you can go fetch it from NASA.
What would be the purpose of having bases on the moon so secretively? I mean, that would seem like such a major push for humanity if this is true.
Well, it's about capability, right? A lot of times when you deal with things that are top secret or classified or Q clearance or whatever. It's about capability. You know, a lot of times if you have somebody who's like in the intelligence community, right? You know, the missions themselves, depending on what you're doing, are obviously classified, but a lot of it is means and methods. You know, how do they do what they do? How do they find the information? How do they process it? A lot of times that's what's classified. It's not so much like the photos, you know, but it's the process by which you derive the photo is classified. So I think if they have secret bases on the moon or on Mars, which I think is definitely within our capability, right? And we've expressed an interest in doing that, you know, I think that it's classified based on capability, that we don't want other people to know that we have the capability to do that.
Okay, but with Mars, or pardon me, with China or India or any other country that's been sending rovers up to the moon, would they not be able to find these bases?
Sure, but you're also assuming that they're landing their rovers where the bases are. The bases would be on the far side, the dark side of the moon. There's only, to my knowledge, there's only one probe that's ever landed there. I think it was a Japanese one that landed, maybe it was the Indian one that landed on the far side of the moon. But I tend to believe that when it comes to lunar operations and some of this other stuff, that the other countries are at some level aware of it. I don't think that it's something that we do necessarily just by ourselves. I think there is some level of collusion for some of these things between us and the Chinese and the Russians and others. You know, on Earth,
I would agree
we
with
can
that.
argue about the Ukraine or we can argue about Taiwan, but when it gets up into space, I think there's kind of an intrinsic pact that we kind of do it together. Because I think the objective is beyond earthbound politics.
Is that from any potential alien threat?
Well, you know, it's funny. You quoted Ben Rich. You know, he went to a Caltech alumni dinner, and he said in his closing remarks, he said, you know, I just want to tell you guys, because he's in a room with a bunch of engineers, and he says, I just want to tell you guys, not only do I have the technology to take ET home, but I got the contract. Those were his exact words, and they were actually backed up by this one of the guys in MUFON who was at the dinner. Um, yeah, I mean, you've got the Reagan thing about that you play at the beginning of the show about, you know, if wouldn't it be nice if we had an alien threat because we'd all see each other as humans, you know? I think there's definitely, and STS-48, I think, is a great example of that. But I yeah, I think that they may know something, obviously. I mean, Blue Book, right? But and the KGB had the same kind of an operation like Blue Book. Um, but yeah, I think definitely, you know, they're aware of something that's coming. I think the problem is that none of them can stop it. And so you don't want to talk about it. You can't admit to it because you got these things streaking through the sky, and the government's not going to go, well, you know what? We don't know what they are and we can't stop them. That's the last thing they're going to do. So
So do you think that Russia or China also have craft that could get to the moon? Or do you think it's a United States only effort?
oh no, I'm sure they do. At least the Russians, for sure. And, you know, I had an interesting conversation with a guy once. He was in the Russian Air Force, and I was asking about Star Wars. And he told me straight, he said, and I trust this guy. I knew this guy for a long time, and I trust him, what he said. And he said, you know, when I was in the Soviet Air Force, he's like, we knew that you guys launched Star Wars. He's like, we knew where it all was, you know, the Thor's hammer, the rods from God, brilliant pebbles, all the lasers and other crap. He's like, we knew where it was. We knew you had it up there. He's like, we had stuff up there too. We still do to this day. He's like, I know for a fact because he worked on it.
That is so weird.
But you know, his point was, and he said it to me kind of casually, which I thought was funny. He said, you know, you're always assuming that it's pointed at the earth. He's like, don't necessarily assume that it's pointed at the earth. And then he just walked away. I worked with him. He's a great guy. I love him to death to this day. He worked on Burn too.
Very interesting. Olav, we have you for another 30 minutes on Spaced Out Radio. And as per usual, when you're on this show, it flies on by. We're going to try and get some audience questions. Coming
Great.
up next as well, more UFO talk with Olav Phillips.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with your host, Dave Scott.
Good question. What's my credit score in space? I think
$900.
wasn't there an astronaut that had to get someone from NASA to deal with their taxes because he was up in space during the deadline?
Yeah, I think so. I think there were a couple of them. Yeah, they got trapped on the space station.
Yeah, so they couldn't file their taxes on time. So
You know,
NASA had to call the
the
IRS and say,
IRS.
hey, can we
Yeah,
have a little bit of a reprieve here?
yeah. Funny thing, you got to give the Russians credit. They were the first ones to put armed battle stations in orbit. They had a whole series of them called the Almaz. And then we had the Mole, which supposedly wasn't armed, but supposedly it was armed. But the Russians, they had, I think, 5 or 6 separate Almaz stations that were actually armed battle stations. And then they fired this thing up called the Polya Skiff. And it was like an automated battle station with like nuclear weapons and stuff. And they claim that this technician at Baikonur sent a command to it to unfurl the solar panels. And so the guy sends the solar panels command, and the solar panels unfurl. And then he forgot that he forgot that he unfurled it, so he sent the command again by mistake, and it fired its maneuvering engines and forced it into a ballistic orbit and like crashed in the ocean. But nobody ever saw it crash in the ocean, so most likely it's still up there.
Wow.
Yeah, it had lasers and nuclear weapons and kinetic weapons and all kinds of stuff.
All the fun toys that you don't want to hear about.
Yeah. Sometimes, it's better not to know.
Right?
Yeah. That's my point.
Probably one of
Well,
those times.
well, hopefully everybody's enjoying the show though. I try to be
Oh,
fun.
you are fun. You're Olav Phillips.
Okay.
You wear plaid.
I wear plaid. And a
I'm
beard.
Olav Phillips and I wear plaid.
But yeah, no, this stuff's interesting to talk about. And a lot of people don't talk about it. They just get hung up about aliens. There's a lot more going on up there than just that. But I do think there are aliens.
How many people you think live on the moon?
I don't know. At least probably 100 at least, if not more.
You think they rotate in and out?
Oh yeah, they'd have to. I mean, according to alternative 3, it was a one-way trip to Mars. But it's I would imagine that they rotate them. I would think.
Yeah, I could see Mars being a one-way trip unless the jump rooms are real.
Yeah, but you have to think about where the story of the jump rooms are coming from, right? That there's he was supposed to become president. Didn't see
No,
that happen.
I understand that, but I mean, it also gets into the entire 20 and back, and
Yeah, I know.
if you buy into that, I used to really believe in the 20 and back until I met one person, and when I saw him on stage speaking, I knew he was full of it.
Yeah, I think most of them are. I mean, the one thing that you learn very quickly is that the people that actually do this kind of stuff, they don't talk. They're in the entire time that I've ever studied this, there's only one guy that I believe actually worked on this stuff that called into a radio show to tell me that he worked on this stuff. Out of all the the shows that I've done over all the years that I've done it, there's one guy, and he was an old man, and he called up 15 minutes before the show ended. It was on ground zero, and he said that he was an aeronautical engineer that worked for a company in Washington State. You can put the two and two together. And he said that he worked on a Star Wars system that they called Solar Warden. And he described it, and he said, "Okay, I gotta go," and he hung up.
Hold that thought. We'll talk about Solar Warden.
Sure.
Here we go. Here we go with the second half of Spaced Out Radio. My name is Dave Scott. We appreciate you tuning us on in wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Hey, we want to remind everybody that if you missed portions of this show or others, you can always check out our free archives on YouTube or any major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. Here's Olav Phillips hanging on out with us, talking about the moon, aliens, humans, where's our technology going, and now Solar Warden. Olav, thank you for being here. Tell our audience what Solar Warden is.
Well, Solar Warden was found by a guy named Gary McKinnon. It's actually, I forgot to mention Gary McKinnon. It's one of the reasons I do believe in the secret space program, is because what Gary McKinnon found, basically the Solar Warden that he talks about, right, is this, this outer defensive operation with spaceships that fly around the solar system, and they defend us against bad aliens and things like that. The reason that I have always been fascinated by Gary McKinnon was the reaction to Gary McKinnon. What Gary McKinnon found was bureaucratic debris. That we all live in bureaucratic societies. Whether you're in Canada or you're in Germany, we thrive on bureaucracy. And in bureaucracy land, they have manifests for buying pencils and pens and toilet paper. And if you've got this magical spaceship that's flying around the solar system, it's going to have toilet paper. I mean, unless they've invented some super cool way to super Japanese toilet, they're going to have toilet paper. And he found the manifest for that kind of stuff, t-shirts, socks, and that's the kind of stuff that nobody cares about. Well, that's what he found. And so this material was being assigned to ships that don't exist. And so by proxy figured out that these ships were extra terrestrial. Effectively, they weren't on the Earth. They have human crews flying around all around the solar system. And the reaction was he hacked into a bunch of NASA computers and DoD computers. We want to send him to Guantanamo. And it's like, why do you want to take this kid he was a kid, and he was on the spectrum. He just wanted to find some pictures of UFOs, and apparently he did. He found pictures of vehicles, probably Earth-based vehicles, on the moon and other places. But they wanted to send him to Guantanamo and put him in a deep pit and make him disappear. Why do you do that? It's cause and effect. Why do you want to do something that severe, right? I mean, he found manifests for toilet paper. Why do you want to stick him in Guantanamo with the guys that architected 9/11? It's just it's an overwhelming reaction. But he found Solar Warden.
Solar Warden deals with the moon. It deals with space. It deals with a lot of
Mars,
craft, Mars,
Oh yeah,
absolutely everything in deep space, and
Yeah.
putting humans there.
right.
Do you think, or in your opinion, what kind of technology would we need to be flying right now in order to make these missions like Solar Warden happen?
Fusion, cold fusion. helium-3 powered cold fusion, which is the dream, right? They always talk about helium-3, and it's this insane power source that could run an entire city off of a helium-3 block the size of like a cooler, and could run it stably at room temperature, right? So you don't have nuclear reactors are nasty. You're basically creating a chain reaction. The amount of heat that they generate, this idea of the China syndrome, that when you get a nuclear reactor that goes critical, it does something called the China syndrome, where they hypothesize that it would burn a hole through the earth because it's so hot, and it would only stop at the core, right? Cold fusion, you could safely run a cold fusion reactor at room temperature. You could have one in your backyard that powers your house that's probably the size of a Coke can, right? And it doesn't require all this other stuff, water. That's why nuclear reactors are generally near the ocean or rivers, because they need constant water to put over the spent fuel rods, and to pump into the ponds, the ponds, and to pump through the reactor itself to cool the rods. Because how you do it is you either lower or push up, depending on who makes the reactor, these fuel rods, and then they start burning, and it creates steam, and you generate electricity. Well, the cold fusion reactor doesn't need that, and it's small. And they hypothesize that helium-3 is the ticket for cold fusion. So probably cold fusion. The rest of it is stuff that, we could build conventionally. We built space stations. We built, space planes, the shuttles, Buran, whatever. We've had space stations since the Mole, the Almaz. The Chinese have one. We have one. We had Skylab. All that stuff, we can build the ship. I mean, if we could build a ship that goes in the ocean, we could build a submarine, we could build a spaceship. The problem is fueling it and making it run. Even recycling the air. Those guys, submariners, they go down there for like 4 months, 6 months. They're under the ocean. They're recycling the air, they're recycling the water, they're recycling everything.
That's very true. We just don't know because we're not involved in the field of how technologically advanced we really are.
Correct. And that's again another reason why DARPA is secret, because DARPA is where this stuff comes from. That's again, I go back to capabilities. When you think about things that are classified, generally things that are classified have to do with methods or capabilities. And, that's, yeah, I mean, that's DARPA's whole operation is capabilities. Transporters, replicators that can make different kinds of foods out of raw, like soybeans and whatever kind of mush. It can modify it at an atomic level to create a steak. Star Trek stuff, Star Trek or Star Wars.
Let's go to a couple audience questions here. Let's start off with T-Bone. Olav, exactly what do you think they are mining on the moon? I agree, they are up there.
I think it's helium-3. I think it's titanium. I think it's a lot of rare metals. Because remember, a lot of the material that you're going to get baked into the moon, right, comes from meteorites, and asteroids that strike the moon. And a lot of times these asteroids have very exotic material on them. But I think the bulk of it is probably helium-3 and then titanium.
Derek is asking, what's your thoughts on Marco Rubio's latest comments on disclosure? Also, do you think Tulsi Gabbard will bring some credible information on disclosure, or more of the same old, same old?
Same old, same old. I mean, we've been talking about disclosure for 30 years, right? We don't have any of it yet. I think the closest we came was something called Cosmic Journey. You can find out about it on sightings back in the 90s. I don't think that disclosure is real. I don't think that we will ever get disclosure. I think it's a fallacy.
I think we will get a controlled disclosure because I think there are too many people afraid of catastrophic disclosure. But
Yeah,
a regulated disclosure, in my opinion, is not disclosure.
correct. I think what you'll get is that there's some there's some capability that they got off of this is the Bob Lazar discussion. There's some capability that they got off of a UFO that they have in their possession, and in order to normalize that technology, they'll sneak it in, right? And that's a kind of disclosure, but the disclosure that Greer talks about, and, it's funny, Greer talks a lot about, I talked to this guy, I talked to that guy. If you look at WikiLeaks and actually look at the emails that he sent, it's pretty unimpressive. It's a lot of them, Leon Panetta and everybody else blowing him off. I'm a firm believer that there will not be any kind of disclosure worth anything. It just won't happen.
And why do you think that is?
Well, it makes you have to rationalize some uncomfortable truths, right? It's one thing to watch X-Files, or Fringe or whatever, and you think to yourself, parallel universes and UFOs and aliens. It's another thing for the US government to say these things are real. They fly through the sky. We don't really know what to do with them. There's actually, go on YouTube, there's a very famous conversation between Art Bell and John Lear. And Bell asks Lear, about disclosure, and Lear says, well, you really don't want it. And Bell says, well, why? He says, well, let me give you some disclosure. And he goes through this whole monologue about disclosure and breaking laws and all this other stuff. And at the end of it, he goes, so what do you think, Art? Did you really want disclosure? And Art Bell says, no, I wish you had not told me any of that stuff. So it's just, I think you'd have to come to terms with a lot of really uncomfortable things. And I think the Brookings study, I think some of that is really real. That people it would cause them to question religion and society. And I just, I don't think
What do
it'll
you
happen.
think? What do you think is the biggest eye opener, or would be the biggest eye opener for humanity, if it was announced that we are not alone?
Well, I think it's that we're not alone. I mean, that by itself, is just, if you sit down and actually think about it, it's this insane problem, right? I'm not very religious, I'm spiritual but not religious. So for me, it's not such a big deal. But if you take somebody that is very religious, that would shake the very foundation of their belief system, right? Because, well, God made the earth. Well, maybe not. God made humans. Well, maybe not. This is the Garden of Eden. Well, maybe not. I mean, you can go through it systematically and get a, well, maybe not. So I think a lot of religion, and then you've got to deal with, the government's been hiding it for X number of decades, and they did all these really bad things to cover it up. And I think that it would be hard for some people, a percentage of the population, to rationalize it. And we can sit around and say, well, you know what? If the government came out and told me UFOs are real, I'd be totally cool with it. But it's one of those things where it's a slippery slope, that if it actually happened, it's one thing to think it, it's another thing to know it, right?
I agree with you. It's
Yeah.
a very tough subject indeed, because I think more people want to know about what is going on. I don't think they're going to get any sort of answers. I think what they will come out and say eventually is, we found a signal. That's the safest way they
Yeah.
can do it. We found a signal way
Right.
off in space. We believe it's of a radio signal of some sort of alien binary code or something like that. I think
Right.
that's the way it breaks down. How about you?
Yeah, it's the wow signal on crack, or it's contact minus the sphere that Jodie Foster climbs into and goes to some other planet. I think that's the safest way to do it, because it's not an imminent threat. It's not to serve man, right? If you've ever seen that Outer Limits, to serve man, it's a cookbook. It's not an imminent threat of they're flying around here and we can't control it. It's okay. There's other aliens out there. The Drake equation was right, but they're not coming here to enslave us or blow us off the face of the earth, or whatever, turn us into a huge mining operation. It's at a distance, and I think that's probably true. And you can see the foundation of it coming, right? The Vatican, well, the aliens were touched by God too. Okay, and well, we've got the Vatican Observatory. When the Pope comes out and says, well, it's not the current Pope, it was a couple popes ago, but he comes out and says, you know what, aliens are cool. They had their own Messiah, and Catholicism can coexist with aliens at a distance, right?
We got 8
I
minutes.
think, yeah.
8 minutes. Let's get to another question here.
Okay.
Let's go to Polly here. What do you think the Vatican archives are saying? In your opinion, what's the most compelling hidden thing there?
In the Vatican archives?
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's probably something of a more occultic nature, something demonology, something about Fatima, because there's always that lost phantom of prophecy, that everybody argues about. Malachi Martin went on at length about what he felt that it was, but I think it's probably stuff like that. Demons are real. We have proof. I mean, the U.S. government sent the Collins elite to open gateways to hell for a reason. So I think that's probably what you find in the Vatican archive.
What do you think? Do you think the Vatican knows that there is life out there? Do you think they have record of it?
I think it's likely that they have some sort of information about it. I mean, they have their own observatory system. Oddly, their largest telescope is called Lucifer, if I recall.
Yes.
And Lucifer, the archangel Lucifer, was the archangel of knowledge, right? That he was an archangel of knowledge and of exploration. So at some level, it's interesting that they called it Lucifer before he fell. And the reason that Lucifer fell is because he became self-aware enough to be like, okay, why can't I be like them? And he got bitter about it and started a war to be free because he felt that he was enslaved. So, having a telescope called Lucifer, I think is kind of fascinating. But no, I'm sure they do. I'm sure there are records going back, of UFOs landing and interacting with the populace and the local priest, parish priest, recording the stories. I'm sure it's in there.
Yeah, no kidding. No
Yeah.
kidding. I think that they know that there is life somewhere or that we are being visited. I am just absolutely convinced of that. And I mean, never mind getting into the religious concept of, the Shroud of Turin or John the Baptist or the Holy Grail or anything like that. I really do believe that they are holding major secrets in those
Oh yeah.
that would literally change the entire dynamic of humanity.
Well, yeah, that's the whole argument for the Moravians, right? And the bloodline of Jesus, that Jesus had children with Mary Magdalene, and Jesus spent time in India. He also came to England, and yeah, I mean, if that would be in the Vatican archives, and that would really upend Christianity, right? That maybe the Cathars got it right, in their beliefs, and they eradicated the Cathars. I mean, they killed every single one of them. But yeah, no, I think the holy bloodline of Jesus, if it exists, is definitely in there, and they'll protect that into the ground because it would upend the Catholic Church. It would completely undermine it.
The Wizard is asking, could some UFOs be echoes caught in time, like stone tape theory?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to UFOs, right, it's all on the table. My own belief is that at least a percentage of them are what's called an ultra terrestrial. So maybe they're interdimensional, maybe they're time travelers, right? Although time traveling would have a lot of paradoxes, the butterfly effect and other things. But no, I think that they're definitely, yeah, for sure.
Where do you think they are? I mean, there is the great debate of UFOs. Are they from outer space? Are they time travelers? Interdimensional hopping? What do you think?
Well, I'm a Fortean, so I'm going to argue for the ultra terrestrial model that says fundamentally we don't know. So based on that, it could be any of those things or all of them, right? Some of their characteristics, you know, m- interdimensional traveling would make a lot of sense. The way they phase in and phase out. And things like, the Mothman, right? Bigfoot, wherever you see Bigfoot and the Mothman, there tend to be a lot of UFO sightings around these locations when these things are seen. So, maybe they're ultra terrestrials as well.
All right, let's move to another question. We got 3 minutes, so probably time for one more here. And
Get a good one.
let's go to
Get a good
Jay
one.
here. What's your thoughts on 3-Eye Atlas and other similar objects in space?
Very weird. I actually ran it through an AI, and the probability of some of the things that 31 Atlas is doing are so astronomically bizarre that I think there's something to it. I think there's something weird about it. Absolutely. I think it's definitely some kind of a probe or something. I mean, Oumuamua, but 31 Atlas is actually accelerating beyond its gravitational capability. Now they're saying it's pulsing every 16.16 minutes. It's got this weird halo. I think there's definitely something to it. Yeah, there's definitely something to it. I personally think that it's artificial. At least there's stuff on it.
What do you think of NASA's response to it? With that photo that literally looked like a microphone. Geez whiz. What am I thinking here? A motorcycle's headlight in the fog.
Right. I think if you look at NASA's behavior, like holding everything until November and the secrecy and the lack of transparency, that also tells me that there's something strange about it. Because NASA is actually an okay operation. Like the people that work there, like they really care about science. Like they really care about this stuff. And to embargo those guys, there's something significant that they're holding back. Under the flagpole in front of you, they're holding stuff back, and that makes me wonder what they're actually doing. There's something to it.
See, I think the NASA people are great.
They are.
I think it's the political side of NASA that is
Yes.
very dangerous. That is
Yes.
very secretive, and they're playing the public for fools.
Correct. That's what I believe, that there's a political element in NASA that it makes decisions that makes people lose faith in NASA and trot around the never a straight answer thing. And it's not the people that work there, it's the political element of it. For sure. I totally agree with you. But the scientists and the technicians and the people that work there, they really care and they really love their jobs and they really want to do good science. But I think as with many things, the political element of it is what damages it.
We got about 30 seconds to go. Let everybody where they can find your books.
Amazon, just do a search for my name on Amazon. It's that simple. You can find the Secret Space Age and the Cold War in Space and some other stuff that I wrote. It's all there.
You always appreciate when you're on the air.
I appreciate being on here.
You're the Olav Phillips. We love it when you're here. We do.
Thank you. Thank you.
We do. You
I
stick
try to
around, stick around for a second.
Sure.
Okay, because we're going to go to break here at the top of the hour. Swamp Dweller and the Wizard coming on up on Spaced Out Radio. It's going to be a jam-packed hour 3 next.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with your host, Dave Scott.
All right, we're clear, Olav.
Okay.
If you want to stick around with the wizard and I, you're more than welcome.
Maybe I'll stick around for a few minutes.
The wizard, you're good with that, eh?
Yeah.
Hold on, he's got to turn his microphone on.
Okay.
Now it's off. Now you're muted. We can't hear you, wizard. We'll let you.
Now.
Yeah, we got you now.
Okay. Yeah, I muted so you wouldn't hear me moving the mic around since you complained last time I did that.
Yeah. Yeah, Olav and you are going to stick around.
All right.
All right. Josh, Olav, Josh. We call him Josh the Wizard around here.
Yeah,
Hi.
me and Olav know each other.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll be right back, guys. All right. Be right back. right. Let's bring the boys in. Look at the wizard there. Just looking fucking stellar.
You
So
know,
I have
the boys are back in
17%.
town. The boys
I
are
have
back in town.
I have 17% on my phone, so I'll hang out for a little bit, but then my battery will die. So
Well, I appreciate you, Oli.
I appreciate you too.
You need a kinetic battery charger. You know, you just shake it or something like a shake weight.
Oh yeah, there you go.
All right, Swamp Dweller will be about 2 minutes 45 seconds, and then we'll bring you guys in. Okay.
Cool.
All right. Big thank you to Erica, T-Bone, and Amy joining our membership on Spaced Out Radio on the YouTube side. Greatly appreciate it. And, of course, you can shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. We do not have ugly swag, people. No ugly swag. So go check it on out. Good stuff. Ball caps, drinking mugs, T-shirts, jackets, hoodies. We got it all right there for you. Here we go, everybody. This show's flying on by as we are now in the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. We got Swamp Dweller and the Wizard coming on up here on the UFO Report. But first, we want to say hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on every major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, we have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Falsiloquence. Falsiloquence is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Let's head to the swamp.
Hello and welcome to Spaced Out Radio's Swamp. I'm Swamp Dweller, and tonight I'm going to take you on a mystic journey of the unknown, sharing tales of monsters, legends, and nightmares. Welcome to the Spaced Out Radio Swamp. I had this supervisor, Kate. One day, we had a discussion that turned into the unexplained, and she told me about something that happened when she was a teenager. She tries to debunk crazy things that have happened, but this is one she hasn't been able to. It was the summer after she graduated high school, sometime in the late half of the 1990s. She was 18 at the time. Her friend Billy was a few years older but still lived with his mother in their house. This was in a small city in western Maryland, and Billy's house had just enough land that he could throw raging, day-to-night summer parties complete with bonfires. At the same time, they weren't very isolated, and random people from the surrounding neighborhoods would always show up at the party. One day, Billy met this skater kid named Nick, and he seemed chill. Being a social animal guy, Billy invited him to hang out with him at the house. Billy probably also took pity on Nick because Nick told him he was a runaway living at the park. So they would play video games, go on rides, and party till late at night. Nick started showing up every day at Billy's house, knocking at the door at 7 a.m. sharp and engaging him in the morning till night drinking. He was about 16 with dark eyes and dark spiky hair. Remember, this was the late 90s. He seemed relatively normal and everything except for a couple of things. The first was that he always wore the same thing, a plain t-shirt and a pair of camo print cargo shorts. Even though he was sleeping in a park, his clothes always looked clean. The second is that he was never seen eating or going to the bathroom, even though Nick drank heavily with Billy. Finally, oddly enough, no one remembers feeling Nick's skin, even my supervisor, who had sat next to him in a car during a road trip. She hung out with Billy and Nick at Billy's house 2 times, and each time she said her friend felt like something was very off with Nick, especially when he would give off this laugh that sounded very evil and maniacal. He also seemed to get kookier and weirder when they went on road trips and got further away from Billy's city. Nick would also never shut up about his father's gun collection. Finally, Billy's hospitality reached its limits after 2 weeks of waking Billy up at 7 a.m. to go party. Billy snapped at Nick at his front door. He said, "Look, Nick, you've been coming here every morning for 2 weeks. You're waking up my mother who's trying to sleep. You need to go now. Please just come back later." Then he slammed the door shut. Nick never showed up again. Billy came to Katie a little bit later with a newspaper article. It was about Nick, who had killed himself. Nick had escaped the mental asylum his parents had put him in Billy's town, got to his father's house, and shot himself with his father's gun. Billy was initially upset because he felt he must have put Nick over the edge when he kicked him out, until he checked the dates. Unfortunately, Nick had committed suicide on July 10th, 2 entire weeks before even meeting Billy.
So weird. So weird. I don't know where Swamp Dweller gets these stories, but man, some of them are just crazy. If you want more just like that, listen to Swamp Dweller on YouTube. Swamp Dweller's channel. Hit subscribe, ring that bell. Thousands of stories for you to choose from each and every time you listen. Time for the wizard.
Spaced Out Radio presents a UFO report. The UFO wizard makes his presence known. Just ready to go.
I still love that intro, Wizard.
Yep. And, I really want to congratulate the person who created it.
It's a computer. Congratulate the computer. All right. Olav Phillips is sticking with us tonight for just a little bit longer. He's having too much fun. Josh Rutledge is here with the UFO report. And I want to just bring this one up here for you. Okay, because today was actually a very, very busy day, and I'm curious to get both of your opinions on this. Apparently, a new amendment has quietly added to the Senate Intelligence Oversight Bill, is raising eyebrows in the UFO community. And why? Well, the language directs defense agencies to provide clearer definitions and reporting standards for materials, craft, or biological evidence of known human origin. While the wording, what do they call it? While the wording is something along the lines of a little bit of a mystery because it fell short last year in the Schumer-Rounds disclosure bill, analysts say it signals continued government discomfort with opaque Pentagon handling of UAP programs. In other words, Aero sucks. Transparency advocates call it a small but meaningful little victory as we move the disclosure ball forward. Josh, I'm curious your opinion on that.
I think it'll be significant if it makes the cut. Like you said, they've tried to add numerous things in there before, and it seems like it never makes the cut, which at this point in time has to be because the people who are behind the scenes are making a direct attempt to keep this information from coming to light. I mean, there's no other reason to continue to cut this kind of inclusion, out of the bill, other than because people want to keep it secret. That's the only possible explanation.
Olav, what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, even if it passes, it's so ambiguous. When the government has very clear standards about how they expect things to happen. When an airplane crashes and the NTSB goes out there to investigate it, they have a 6-inch thick rule book on how to handle just about anything. The military is no different. So, this idea that they throw out some ambiguous language, it's placation. I don't think it'll result in anything. Also, you have to remember there's something very important about this, is that a lot of this kind of stuff, right, is part of special access programs, and special access programs are not under the purview of what you're talking about. The restrictions on the special access programs are really driven by the defense contractor. So they're not required to release this stuff. That's how they hide things. So I don't. It's great that somebody at the FAA comes out and says, okay, well, we got a radar track of something going, 27,000 miles an hour at 180,000 feet. and everybody goes, woo, disclosure. But the reality is, if something crashed, they're going to hand it over to Lockheed or Boeing or Northrop Grumman, and it'll just disappear.
Well,
I can see where the UFO community is excited about this because we're used to making mountains out of morsels.
Yes,
We very much are, because we will
absolutely.
take anything and overexpose it to make sure that it means more than it does.
It's
That
a
being
cod.
said, I do believe that this could be a step in the right direction. What direction that is, we don't know,
That's
because
just it.
I don't know if the politicians who are pushing for the transparency, like Tim Burchett, like Anna Paulina Luna, and others, I don't know if they fully understand or comprehend the deep, dark part of this on what it could mean to society, what it could mean to Earth, what it could mean to absolutely everything. Never mind giving up the secrets, take the aliens away from it, those secrets of what the United States really has in its Defense Department that nobody knows about. Because if you're talking about the UAP aspect of everything, we have to think that they are trying to expose what the secret technologies are. And maybe that's the end game overall, Josh.
Well, and if you really think about it, that's the whole thing that started in the 2017 New York Times article was not so much about the government's UFO program. It was the fact that there was these large special access programs that existed that the Congress had zero oversight for, and that's, in my opinion, that's what really all these UAP hearings and everything else are about, is an attempt to bring these special access programs underneath the umbrella of congressional oversight. Um, they just happen to have picked on this particular topic for a special access program because it has public interest. And so, again, they can use the public's interest as a chess piece, if you will, on this in this game that they're playing to try to get congressional oversight. Um, the other piece is, like, Olaf, you're talking about if the FAA announced they had um, what was it, radar return for something doing 127,000 miles an hour.
Right.
Um, would that admission even be an indication of our radar capabilities? And is that
Exactly.
not one of the reasons why they continue to hold so much of this stuff back?
You got it. You hit the nail on the head. It's capabilities. This is what they classify as capability and method. And I think it would expose a lot of things. I mean, remember the furor when Trump released some satellite photos and it showed the capability of the sat. It wasn't even the full capability. It was only a partial capability. Everybody in the Pentagon freaked out. So no, I think that I think you're right. I think it's a way to get support for it. Special access programs there is no oversight. They're not foiable. They're deep dark holes, and the Congress wants to control it for a lot of reasons.
Well, and this is not the first time. The New York Times article, I think, highlighted a specific SAP, but this is also not the first time that there have been concerns raised about the fact that the Pentagon hasn't passed an audit ever. So,
Right.
this has been an ongoing conversation. And in my opinion, I think the New York Times article and all the UAP stuff, again, it's just a convenient SAP that has public interest, because
And
there are probably a bunch of other SAPs that they also want congressional oversight of, but the public either A, wouldn't care to know about them, or B, shouldn't know about them.
and remember, this goes way back. I mean, in the 80s, there was a huge furor over the fact that they were buying $150 toilet seats, right? Later, we realized that, well, they were actually buying a $20 toilet seat, and $130 was going into a special access program. They were just rerouting things because, since when does Lockheed sell toilet seats, right?
Right.
They have all kinds of ways to do these things, and it's because they don't want people to know. Sometimes for very good reason, and sometimes maybe not so good reasons. But
Yeah.
it's a mountain out of a molehill. There will be nothing that comes of it.
I would imagine a
They're-
Lockheed Martin toilet seat is very, very aerodynamic.
I would imagine they're very talented engineers. I'd imagine that Skunk Works toilet seat, it has a skunk on it, and it probably
Yeah,
works really, really well.
it's not because it stinks.
No.
That is for sure.
It's a nothing burger.
Let's follow this one up with apparently there's been an interview conducted with a former U.S. intelligence figure speaking anonymously that
Uh-huh.
claims the United States government may no longer directly retain, pardon me, certain recovered anomalous materials. Instead, they say a private sector agency legacy contractor has allegedly been tasked with storage and engineering attempts. While unverified, the claim echoes earlier testimony at the last UFO hearing, especially by George Knapp, about off-book aerospace involvement. Expect this rumor to stir debate in the coming weeks. Your thoughts, Olav?
I don't know why it would stir debate. That's a special access program. I mean, that's how it works, right? They hand it off and it disappears. That's the whole point of having one. This has happened repeatedly with all kinds of stuff. I don't know what the debate is. They've been doing this stuff for 20 years. So it's a special access program. That's how it works. You hand it off to it.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think it will probably generate a lot of debate over the validity of the statements that are going to be made and the proclamations that are going to come out. If that's the debate that the article or the person reporting it is referring to, because if there's one thing that the UFO community loves to do, it's pick apart witnesses.
That's true. And witnesses that are not necessarily good to be picked apart. They start finding real problems with a lot of these guys.
And realistically, I think we already knew this was going on. Maybe the public didn't. It's not news to us because we're involved in this field, but it is news to other people who have maybe just a faint interest or just learning about this subject on how deep it really goes. And once again, I often wonder, are we talking about hidden U.S. technology? Are we actually truly talking about aliens? I don't think I think that's a debate that also needs to be answered too.
Well, there's also another possibility, like Olaf was talking about, ultra terrestrials, is that there is some ancient form of other intelligent life that used to reside, or even still does, but is now hidden in some way on the earth, and it's their technology. I mean, maybe we excavated some archaeological site and found one of their ancient craft. It's not that it crashed or that it was a crash retrieval or that we telepathically landed it in a field and Jake Barber swooped it up with a helicopter and flew it off somewhere. It's just that we just stumbled across old technology from a civilization that predates humanity. And so I think the problem that we run into is that everything that comes out around the UAP topic, and this is, I don't mean any disrespect to anybody, because that's the whole point, is to have theories, but we all have our theories as to what this is. And so we hear these news snippets, or these interview snippets, or witness testimony, and we try to make what they say fit within our individual theories, as opposed to looking at the evidence as a whole and removing any bias that we may have around what our theories might be. To assume that it might be ours, or it might be aliens, or it might be time travelers, or the point is that we don't know what it is. All we can do is look at the plethora of evidence that's being provided, as well as the plethora of evidence that's been captured over the last 80 years with witness testimony, experiencer testimony, so on and so forth, and try to see where that evidence takes us, as opposed to try to navigate that evidence back to our theory.
Good point, gentlemen. Really appreciate that. We got 4.5 minutes to go here before we got to go to break at the bottom of the hour. One final part on this whole governmental side here that I want to ask you guys about is apparently on the science end, physicists from the Max Planck Institute released a theoretical paper proposing that some UFO/UAP movements, like sudden acceleration without inertia, could be explained by localized gravitational lensing fields. Though highly speculative, the model attempts to match observed Navy videos and pilot accounts. It already is circulating among mainstream science journalists, marking yet another example of academia stepping into the UAP territory. Josh, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this also is definitely in line with what Hal Puthoff talked about in the Age of Disclosure documentary, that it's some sort of a warp bubble or something that the craft creates localized so that the craft can move around freely in a different space time than what it is actually inhabiting in our space time. It is very cool that we'll call it mainstream academia is willing to get into the conversation, because that is something that is desperately missing. And it's something that I've argued that the only way we're going to push this forward is if mainstream science is willing to give it a fair investigation.
Very true. Olav, your thoughts?
I think it's utterly fascinating because everything that you two just said is Bob Lazar 1989, right? The Sportster had gravitational lensing system. It created a warp bubble around itself.
Mm-hmm.
They canceled inertia. This is Bob Lazar S4 1989. Watch excerpts of the government Bible on YouTube. You can't buy it anymore, but watch excerpts of the government Bible on YouTube. Lazar draws out this whole thing. I mean, he's got the boblazar.com. He's got animations of how the warp bubbles are created. Maybe he got element 115 wrong. I don't know, but everything you just described is a Sportster hidden at Papoose Lake, 1989 George Knapp.
Then
Balthazar.
that makes me wonder, Olaf, is are these, is Hal Puthoff and others just regurgitating the same words in a new way, but really they've made no discernible advancement in understanding the technology at all since Bob Lazar's announcement?
Look, I love Hal Puthoff and all those guys, but they're spooks. I think what you're seeing is I think what you're seeing is the trickle, if that is indeed what the guys from Max Planck, who are eminent physicists. I mean, Max Planck is one of the most advanced research facilities for this kind of stuff in the world, right? If this is what the guys at Max Planck are talking about, this is that trickle disclosure that we talked about before, right? Because I don't know if it's they haven't gotten any further. I doubt that. I think it's justifying what Lazar has always said. And I met Lazar. I sat at his desk across from his desk from this guy. He's a nice guy. He is very very honest with you when you talk to him, you know? And his story has not changed materially since 1989. And he's
Mhm.
got, I know Stanton Friedman tore him apart, but he's in the Los Alamos phone book. He's got a W-2 from Department of Naval Intelligence. There's something there. And he showed me on his Corvette where Dennis Mariani put a bullet through the back end of it.
The
Lazar,
UFO
89.
report continues on Spaced Out Radio for the final half hour.
This is Spaced Out Radio and your host, Dave Scott.
All right, we are clear.
All right. Well, it was good talking with you guys.
Yeah.
No problem, Olav. We'll let you get going
Okay.
because we know your phone's about to die.
It
So-
really is.
And you look cold. I don't know.
It's pretty damn cold. That's cool. All right, guys. Well, have
All
a
right.
great show.
Thank you, brother.
And Josh,
we'll
you
talk
are
in the
a
next
great
couple days.
researcher. Yeah, we'll talk in the next couple days.
All right, cool. Thanks,
right.
man.
Talk to you soon. Okay, bye.
All right, buddy.
All right. It's just the two of us.
You and I.
Oh. I know you got that thing you sent me. I assume you're going to bring that up.
Yeah.
And then Saturday is a anniversary for a pretty big abduction case in Italy.
Yeah, let's get to it.
We can talk about that if you want.
The wizard.
And then next week, December 9th, is the anniversary for the Kecksburg UFO,
The old Kecksburg one.
which could be interpreted as egg-shaped. Often
Very
said
true.
acorn, but still could be egg.
Do you prefer egg or acorn?
I mean, eggs are edible. Acorns are not. Although my brother and I did try to make acorn butter in our little dump truck when we were kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ground up with a rock, bunch of acorns, and mixed in some mud because that's what butter was. I don't know. We were kids.
Rock and roll, man. Rock and roll. Good morning, Skip to Malou. I'm sure I'm not missing anybody here. Love the comment, T-Bone. The phenomenon rules.
It certainly occupies a lot of time.
I was talking to a lady today about that.
Acorns.
She's just a friend of mine, and well, she's not really a friend, an acquaintance in town, and she was talking about how she's been on this spiritual journey lately, and I'm like, so where are you? I said, are you part of the Peace, Love, and Lighters or what? I said, are you getting real into spirituality?
Yeah.
She's like, oh, I haven't really, I'm just learning. I'm just starting my quest and all of this. I'm like, okay, be careful. Be careful. I said, I looked at her. I said, well, what do you want to do? She goes, I don't know. I seem to be able to channel. I seem to be able to hear spirits talking, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, cool. I said, so how many crystals have you bought? And she goes, oh, I'm just starting to learn about those. I said, well, if you want the real phenomena, I said, you don't need to get any of them. You don't need them.
But you do need to make sure you protect yourself.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I mean, crystals are just another tool to do so, but
yeah.
But there is no hiding the fact that if you don't protect yourself psychically, all kinds of crap can come bug the crap out of you in your home,
I
your
agree with you there.
workplace. Yeah.
But what I'm talking about is in a lot of these new age spiritualists, because it's a popular thing to do right now. Okay. It's all about all of the different crystals and tarot cards. Said to her, I said, you know how you could tell a person doesn't know how to read tarot? She goes, how? I said, they read the book.
Hmm. Well, you know, I went
Here we
through. I
go.
went through
Here
that.
we go. Sorry.
Okay.
We're into the final half hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. We appreciate you tuning us on in wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Hey, we want to remind all of you that if you missed most of this show or others, check out our free archives on YouTube or any major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. Here we go. Josh Rutledge, we call him the Wizard, here for the UFO report. And Josh, big money being spent at a United States university to study UFOs. What do you know about this?
Yep. So you're right. I mean, it's again talking like we were, in the first half hour of this third hour, about mainstream science giving this a fair shake, and this is at the University of Albany in New York, and basically, one of the things that I've kind of harped on for a lot for the last probably 18 months to 2 years is the fact that in order for universities and scientific departments to give any fair look at the UAP topic, they need funding. And the only way that that's going to happen, mass is if the U.S. government and other governments around the world are willing to fund those research projects. But the nice thing here about this University of Albany thing is that this group of scientists were a part of some of them were a part of the Tear in the Sky documentary, that scientific research that they did near Catalina on the coast of California some years ago, about 3 years ago. And a benefactor saw that documentary and was inspired by it and made a significant contribution. They don't really say the number, but a significant contribution to the school to establish what's called UAPX, which is U Albany Project X, and it is the scientific investigation of UAPs, UFOs.
Gary Voorhees, who's a good friend of this show, comes into our chat room quite a bit. He was on the USS Princeton when it happened, and him and Kevin Day were the ones who actually started or to put together UAPX, and then they got the scientists put together, and it's really come together as a big group, and it's taken them years in order to get this project underway. But you know what? They always believed, and they finally got it done, which I think is exciting for them. I'm very curious to see where they're going to go, if they're going to do another documentary or if they're going to stay away from the cameras and just concentrate and using this money as something that they are going to try and find scientific method or maybe even new technologies that can attract or record UFO/UAP type events. And I think it's great that we have this happening. I really do. And the fact that a private donor, somebody who's very wealthy, has given them a bag full of cashola, because any of these type of projects does need a funding system. I mean, you want to do anything today, you need to have somebody with deep pockets, and they were lucky enough to get it. So I think this is great for the community. And the more universities, Josh, and I know you're big on education, just like a lot of us are, but the more these universities start taking this subject seriously, which I think is going to happen more and more often, the better it is, because we're actually going to be expanding on science with this if it ever comes out. Even though disclosure doesn't happen, the science doesn't stop.
Oh yeah. And by the way, it's not an anonymous donor. His name is Tony Gorman, and he is a longtime businessman. He is a principal owner of the Gorman Group, and is a third-generation family-owned highway construction and materials company. So I guess he's got some money. And yeah, I think it is. I suspect that the more universities treat this thing seriously, the more likelihood there is that we might actually find UAP related courses being integrated into various degree programs. I could certainly see a case for experiencer or social response to UAP being included in like sociology degrees or social worker degrees, or the more science, physics type thing, looking at UAP phenomena as how it relates to what we know about physics. So, but in order for us to get to that point where the UAP topic is included as a part of legitimate university study, it has to open up with universities doing the research.
I would agree with you. And we know there are other universities that are into this topic. Of course, Harvard, because of Avi Loeb. Rice University has been studying many experiencers over the years. We know Stanford is into it. I mean, look, Ivy League schools pay a lot of money for the best of the best instructors. And when you have two Ivy League schools in Stanford and in Harvard that are looking into this, eventually the other Ivy Leagues are going to step in. That the other big-time scientific universities, whether it's Caltech, whether it's MIT, or others, are going to jump on board as well. So this is a ball that's rolling. And I think university-wise, I think it's great that they're going to be hopefully taking this more and more seriously over the years, because there's a new science out there. We don't know what it is. We've seen it. We just need to be able to figure it out.
I had a dream some years ago of myself in the far future. I was an old man. Dave, I had a beard like yours. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I had one. And in this dream, I was invited to the White House to meet the president, because I was the foremost expert on the sociology and psychology of ET encounters. And so my only hope is that I can get to that point, and there's someday there's a degree for such things, and B, that other people will also take it serious enough to start looking at all of these things and how they are really meant to impact humanity. Humanity is not just a silent experiencer in a lot of these things. I think that there is a purpose behind humanity's involvement in the phenomenon. And the more people that take up an interest in that space, I think the better off we'll be as a society, and the more we will advance our understanding. Maybe it gets to the point where we're no longer so much concerned about the technology of the visitors, but more so how it affects our lives and how much more we can grow as a society and as a species to reach the level of enlightenment, if you will, that some of these ETs have reached.
Let's move on to our next topic. You have a little bit of a historic story here for us.
I do. So December 6th, which is tomorrow or today, depending on what time zone you're in, 1978, it was a pretty big abduction case that happened in Italy. This is I'm probably going to butcher a lot of this because I do not speak Italian, but the Zanfretta abduction. The first encounter was December 6th, 1978, by an individual named Pierre Fortunato Zanfretta. He was 26 years old. He was a night watchman employed by a private security firm, and his encounters took place in the town of Tarigula. I don't know, in Genoa, Italy. So his first encounter, like I said, was December 6, 1978. 78 is very near and dear to me because it was the year I was born. But Zanfretta was performing a routine security check at the Villa Cosa Nostra. At approximately 8:30 p.m., he reported seeing a large triangular or egg-shaped craft behind the villa. A bright, intense green-white light illuminating the yard, and the craft appeared to be about 40 to 50 feet wide. While investigating the light source, he claims he encountered two massive beings. He described them as 10 feet tall, covered in warty, greenish, reptile-like skin. They had large heads and pointed, glowing yellow eyes. They also had clawed hands. Very, what's the one in Louisiana? Oh, I'm totally blanking on the, come on, Dave. What's the case in Louisiana where the creatures had claw hands?
Oh, goodness.
Anyways, I'll come back to it. I'll come up with the name here in just a minute. But anyway, so and they were wearing metallic suits. Zanfretta said that the beings moved with a heavy, lumbering gait and emitted heat. This also reminds me of, I've got a really good friend who had an experience with a being in the desert here in Arizona. And he described it as very lumbering, very tall, and it had like a mask or something over its face to help it breathe with a long tube that came down towards the bottom of its body. So the physical after effects, when police responded, they did find that Zanfretta was in shock. He was almost hypothermic. And his flashlight was on the ground, but it was still warm. A large semicircular indentation was in the soil where he said the craft had landed, and several witnesses in the town reported a large bright light in the sky. Over 50 people were interviewed. And the police to this day do not know how to describe what he experienced. They do not have an explanation for it. Later, he went under some hypnosis and recalled being taken aboard the craft, seeing advanced technology, seeing a sphere of light, which was used for communications. The beings called themselves the Dargos, and they were from planet Teutonia. They said they had no intention to harm him. They were observing human behavior, and they wanted him to serve as a contactee. He had continued 10 more additional encounters between 1978 and 1980. Those included telepathic communications, lost time, a claim that beings wanted him to return to them voluntarily. This is also very similar to the Woody Derenberger experience with Indrid Cold.
Right.
A device that beings allegedly gave him, which later disappeared. Also very similar now to Betty and Bernie Hill, where Betty was given a map, but then it disappeared. Repeated sightings of the craft on or near his patrol routes. People actually reported that he would disappear for some period of time and then show up and just be very confused and not knowing really, where he was or what he had been doing, in the time that he was missing. So it's a very interesting case. I still can't think of the name of the one in Louisiana.
The only thing I can think of is the Kentucky Goblins.
Now, I guarantee you that once I come up with the name here, you're like, oh yeah, But let's see, abduction case.
Not the folk monster.
What's that?
Not the folk monster.
No,
That's more of a Bigfoot.
no. This was they're like two guys. They were fishing on the Gulf in Louisiana. The craft came up to them. These two they had like pointy things coming out of the side of their head. They hovered out of the craft up to them, carried them or floated them onto the craft. They had claw-like fingers. I don't know. It's totally eluding me. The name of the case. But yeah. And as I'm trying to type and talk at the same time.
Oh, that's all right. We got 5 minutes to go here.
Okay.
I got one here for you.
Okay.
This one happening here in Canada. Yeah, two commercial pilots flying near Thompson, Manitoba, reported encountering a pair of bright, fast-moving objects that ascended and vanished instantly. Nav Canada, which for our American friends is like your FAA. Okay, Nav Canada logged the case, and local residents reported seeing unusual lights around the same time. Atmospheric explanations haven't been matched. Haven't matched the described behavior. Canadian researchers note the area has a long history of strange sightings, including radar anomalies dating back to the 1970s. You know, the reason why this story sticks out for me, Josh, is because I remember having a conversation with Lou Elizondo. And it was a texting conversation about this. And I remember saying to him, you know, I'm in Canada, man. Like, where should I look? Where should I look? And he typed back two words: watch Manitoba. Manitoba over the years has had numerous big time sightings that go back for decades. There was an alleged UFO crash in, I believe, 1953 or 1955. And when the Canadian military arrived, the U.S. military was already on scene, loading the craft up, to be hooked up to a helicopter. And when the Canadian military said, you can't do that, this is our land, this is our country, they basically said to the Canadian military, tough beans. Took it anyways.
Is that the Falcon Lake incident?
No. This was before Falcon Lake.
Okay.
You have the Falcon Lake incident. You have what Grant Cameron calls the Johnny Red Star, or Charlie Red Star, pardon me. The Kecksburg case, which is an anniversary that's coming up, they believe that one started over top of Manitoba, went over the Great Lakes, and then eventually into Pennsylvania, where it crashed. They believe Shag Harbor may have started in that area and made its way across the Great Lakes as well. There are many UFO incidents in that area.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating area also geologically, because all of that area going back to the last ice age was covered in glaciers. If you don't know how the Great Lakes were formed, they're mostly were carved into the ground from these great glaciers moving across the ground, and then when the glaciers melted, they filled up with most of the runoff. So if there was a civilization that predated the last ice age, as a few other folks have alluded to, maybe they lived underneath those glaciers in those areas, and so they just kind of continued to operate in the area once those glaciers had melted.
Yeah, and it goes right up into Hudson Bay and the Canadian Shield, which is one of the hardest surfaces on Earth. Natural surfaces, that is. So,
well, and you get into the whole concept of I don't know if you're familiar with the book The Smoky God, where these Norwegian sailors supposedly found an entrance into hollow/inner Earth around the area of the Arctic Circle, and that's not for UFO craft, that's not too far away for things to fly or however they get around. So yeah.
It is interesting though, because there seem to be these centralized locations for hotspots, Josh. You see it with MUFON, where it always seems to be that one area where they're coming in. It's like every 100 miles or so, there's this hotspot where people are seeing things. I've lived in two of them. When I lived near, just outside of Vancouver, about an hour's drive outside of Vancouver, that was a hotspot for black triangles. Okay, where I live now is a hot spot for people seeing UFOs. And another interesting part about that is my area is also a hot spot for meteorites.
Well, Arizona has the largest kind of preserved crater from meteorite strike 50,000 years ago. But you're right. There are a lot of seemingly hotspots. What John Keel often referred to as window areas.
Yes.
And so that's actually part of my investigation and part of my presentation that I've made now a few times to MUFON as well as on some podcasts, is looking at these what I call convergences, and how this phenomenon, not just UFO phenomenon by the way, but how it tends to be concentrated in specific areas around the world. I one of my very first convergences was in Wales in the UK, identified in 1977. So yeah, and the UK has a lot of interesting activity.
Josh, we got to wrap it up right there because it's time for us to go home for the night. Turn it over to the next guy as we say hello. Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal, rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at work, at home, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everyone in our chat rooms tonight. YouTube, Twitch, LGAP, Facebook, Spreaker, LinkedIn, the Space Travelers Club, and on X, at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and Bigfoot Broadcasting Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends, we're watching. We own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Yes, the Woo train has docked for the night, but soon, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Your tickets never expire. If you want to bring a friend, we've got room for them too. Good night, everybody. Beautiful work, Josh. Beautiful work.
Yep, it was good stuff. It was, by the way, it was the Pascagoula incident.
I figured that was the one you were talking about.
Yeah, the only words that were coming to mind were allagash, and I knew that wasn't right. But I looked it up and I put it in the chat, and I think some other folks, Joe Monk, might have been, screaming at us to say Pascagoula. So, but yeah.
No problem. No problem. What's your plan for tomorrow?
Let's see. What is tomorrow? Friday, Saturday. I don't think I have anything on Friday. But on Saturday, my daughter, one of my daughters is on a dance team, and she is in a parade, a local Christmas holiday parade. So we're going to go do that Saturday morning. And then I get a rare opportunity. Both my kids are going to a sleepover. And so my wife and I get, time alone where we will probably just sit and watch TV, but not have to worry about, screaming, fighting kids and all that kind of stuff. So,
Oh God, one of those lucky nights. You know what I always find funny is when you have those nights and you're like, oh hey honey, want to get a little frisky. You're like, yeah, sure. And you're like in your pajamas on the couch, half asleep at 8 o'clock.
yep.
Right. Then you
Yep.
wake up the next morning, you look at your partner and you're like, boy, did we miss an opportunity there.
Yeah. Maybe, we'll see. These days, I can count on one hand, after 20 years of marriage. So, but yeah, just spending time together without having to worry about uh, the inevitable arguments and fighting that you'll hear from somewhere else in the house. So, and we might go see a movie. There's some movies out that we want to see, or might go to dinner somewhere. The nice thing is just being able to do that stuff, and again, not have to worry about getting back to kids or whatever the case is. So, but anyways, well, Dave, hope you have a good weekend.
You too, buddy.
And
You're awesome. Hey, I'm off work my daytime job tomorrow.
yeah,
And so if you need to chat or if you have some time to chat about what we talked about,
yeah,
radio wise, give me a call.
okay, will do.
All right.
What time are you? And it's your day off. You sleep in?
I'm usually awake by 9.
Okay.
Yeah, 8:30, 9 o'clock. So anytime after that.
Okay. All right, man. I'll talk to you later. Good night, everybody.
See you, buddy. All right, there we go. Now we can publish that. Hi, I'm Dave. I'm Dave, everybody. That's me. I'm Dave. I'm going to pig out an ice cream when I get done this. I like ice cream. What is your favorite ice cream, people? Let's see it in the chat room. What is your favorite ice cream? Who's on the show tomorrow night? Oh, it's our Keith Andrews. Yeah, let's turn up the woo a little bit, people. We got our boy R. Keith in the studio tomorrow night. Yeah, we got the old R. Keith. I don't know about you, but I'm excited about that. loading? Not yet. Haagen-Dazs. Swiss almond. Lime sherbet. Chapman's peanut butter. That's good ice cream, T-Bone. Amy, I want more secrets. With that southern drawl saying y'all all the time. Homemade brand peanut butter and chip. Orange sherbet. Chocolate or mint chocolate. Cookie dough is fantastic, Taylor Bick. Fantastic call there. Strawberry cheesecake is good. Toffee ice cream is fantastic. Eggnog ice cream. Oh, Jay True Seeker, what's wrong with you? I'm teasing, by the way. What's wrong? Julia Rios eating ice cream right now. What flavor are you eating? I'm going to have Shark Attack tonight. I'm going to finish off the box tonight. Ate like half of it after last night's show. See if I can get a picture of that up. Shark Attack ice cream. There it is. Oh, it's just the best. Absolute best. That's what it looks like right here. Hold on. Let me share the screen here. There it is. It's like gray and purple with like red blood veins running through it. It's like strawberry. It's fantastic. Like there's the coloring right there. Gray into the blue. That tastes like bubble gum. So good. There's the packaging. Like, look at that. Beautiful. Beautiful ice cream. Who makes it? I forget who makes it. Foothills. Yeah. Look at that. Oh, my mouth is watering. I'm going to be pounding the hell out of that ice cream afterwards. Frick yeah. Oh, God. Such good stuff. Talitha, how are you? I'm going to be doing a podcast, recorded podcast with Talitha tomorrow. Is it Talitha or Talitha? Which one is it? Talitha or Talitha? Type number 1 for Talitha or 2 for Talitha. Or 3 for Bob. Talitha, isn't it? Talitha. Sweet. Sweet, sweet, sweet. Cookie dough is good ice cream, man. God, I miss the days of not having to wear glasses. Not that I mind wearing glasses, but miss the days of not wearing them. One thing I've never been able to do is clean my glasses properly. God, I suck at cleaning glasses. And I went from my Ray-Ban frames, my plastic Ray-Ban frames to these metal ones. I don't recommend it. I think these frames that I got a few months ago, probably the worst Ray-Ban frames I've ever got. I'm going to go back to the old ones next time. I agree, Jay Truth Seeker, because it is nice to see clearly. Very nice. I started wearing glasses at 23 because I was getting really bad migraines commuting to college and back. Now my eyes are so weak. Like I go like this and everything like in the studio is blurry. Like I can't read a word in the chat room. My eyes, I don't even see my eyes on the screen. They're just like black areas. I go, hold on. You can see my teeth. Definitely see the beard. Like bigger things, like even this light right here. I can see it. I know what it is, but it's blurry. Sasquatch face is blurry. Television behind me was blurry. My bar here is all kind of like smushed together. I can't tell what anything on any of these shelves are. I mean, I know that's a picture. I know that's my orb. I think that's a gnome. I'm looking at the top of my glasses right now, so I can't see. I think those are my candle heads. Not sure what that is. Or that. And then up here on the top row. Okay. Now I can see. Oh yeah, that was my magic 8 ball. That's what that is. Yeah, the old 8 ball. Maybe we'll bring it back one day. Just did it too often. It's like the Dave 101. I just got sick of doing the Dave 101. Had to shovel snow 2 days in a row. Tired. So who's going to come to our Vegas party? Anybody in our chat room? May 21st to 25th? Come hang out. Who's thinking about it? Jay Truthseeker, when are you buying your Caribou Con ticket? You and T-Bone got to get your butts up here. Amy's in Texas. That's why I wear this hat. It's for Amy. Gorgeous Larry. Vegas will be May 21st to 25th. Caribou Con September 18th through 20th. Caribou Con is going to be more fun. Is this your actual? We're done the show, Tally. We're done the show. I'm just editing the show for my radio stations. So that's what we're doing now. The show ended 18 minutes ago. Yeah, 18 minutes ago. Radio show portion did. That's running. Our Keith Andrews tomorrow night, everybody. Big thank you tonight to T-Bone, my man, and Kitty Caddywhack for the great super chats. Amy for joining our membership club. Don't forget, do us a favor. Leave a comment after the show. It helps with the algorithms, same as giving us a thumbs up or down, whatever you prefer. I'm not going to be too picky about that. I'd prefer a thumbs up, but sometimes you get a thumbs down. Let's just be honest, right? So I appreciate that. And leaving a comment also helps. Do me a favor, okay? Tell a friend. That's what we're doing. Tell a friend. Tell them to come by. See you tomorrow night, everybody.
Stay healthy, my friend.
You too.
You need bail money, give me a call.
Always, Dad. Take care.
You too.